It is 5:30. I'm going to call our meeting to order. In attendance, we do have everyone in attendance this evening on Teams. Can I get a mover to approve the agenda? Moved by Trustee Leclerc, seconded by Trustee Sipcar. Thank you very much. Any discussion on the approval of this agenda for public session tonight? Seeing and hearing none. Anyone opposed to approval of the agenda? And that passes. Can I get a mover and a seconder to convene us into private session? Moved by Trustee Leclerc.
Support.
Seconded by Trustee Sartori. Thank you very much. Any discussion on that? Seeing and hearing none. Anyone opposed? And we're in private session, so we'll see everyone back in here at 7 o'clock. Trustees, I'll see you over in the private session. We'll be back over in here at 7. Thanks, everyone.
It is 7 p.m. on my laptop, so I will call this meeting to order. First order of business will be the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are on land and surrounded by water, originally inhabited by Indigenous peoples who have traveled this area since time immemorial. This territory is within the lands honored by the Wampum Treaties, agreements between the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenni Lenape, and allied nations to peacefully share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Specifically, we would like to acknowledge the presence of the Three Fires Confederacy, Ojibwe, Odawa, Potawatomi, and Huron-Wendat peoples. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture while remaining committed to moving forward respectfully with all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. As stated earlier, all trustees and student trustees are in attendance on Teams this evening. First order of business is the approval of tonight's agenda. Do I have someone to move that?
I'll move it.
Moved by Trustee Cook, seconded by Trustee Leclerc. Is there any discussion based on tonight's agenda? Seeing none, is there anyone opposed to approving tonight's agenda? I see or hear none, so that carries. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest for tonight's education meeting? Hearing none. Do I have someone to approve the minutes from the education meeting of June the 7th? Trustee Sartori, seconded by Trustee Cook. Is there any discussion about these minutes? I don't see any hands and I see nothing in the chat. So is there anyone opposed to approving the minutes from the June 27th meeting? Hearing none, that also carries. Is there any business arising from those minutes? I don't see any hands, so we can move on to our presentation. The first presentation is the progress monitoring math and literacy support.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for allowing both myself and Superintendent Canty and Superintendent Wilcox the opportunity to provide a update on monitoring based on performance during the 2021-22 school year for students. On the next slide, you'll see that EQAO was conducted during the year 21-22, school year of 21-22, but reports are expected to be released in late October. Individual student reports for the OSSLT in the fall and the winter were shared with students, and they simply indicated to students whether they were successful or unsuccessful. And the individual student reports for math were available immediately upon completion, but school and board results are confidential until the provincial school and board results are released by the Education Quality and Accountability Office. On the next slide, we simultaneously, while EQAO is happening on any typical year, we also conduct our internal kind of litmus test to know if things are improving. And in elementary, we divide the system into 3 areas to look at certain schools for writing, certain schools for math, and certain schools for reading. In this particular slide, you'll see that we looked at specifically improvement in writing. We did a pre and post assessment with the Ontario Writing Assessment, and we were specifically looking for an increase in the area of thinking and communication by at least 1 level for students. And we looked specifically at grade students in grade 2 and grade 7. So of the grade 4 students, 49% improved at least by 1 level in thinking, 43% at least by 1 level in communication, and 42% for grade 7 students at least 1 level in thinking, and 32% of grade 7 students improved at least by 1 level in communication. This year, with that data, we're doing a recommitment to supporting writing instruction in the system. So you will see that in our operational plan for the 2022-23 school year. On the next slide, you'll see that we also looked for improved writing for our French students, and we did a smaller sample looking at students in FI in grade 4 and 7, and you'll see that the average level of achievement went from 1.9 to 2.4 in writing, and for grade 7 French immersion students that were marker students, it went from 2.2 to 2.35. And there was a slight decrease for core French students. On the next slide, you'll see our focus in the area of mathematics, and we were hoping to increase a demonstrable increase of 2 points between the pre and post assessment. And we used a screener specifically from the Hastings Prince Edward District School Board to do the pre and post assessment, and for kindergarten, and then we used the prime assessment tool. And you'll see that for SK students, there were 62.8 students who had increased more than 2 points. For grade 1, 60.6 greater than 2 points. And for grade 2, a 62% increase of greater than 2 points. And grade 3, a 64.3 greater increase in 2 points. For the 2022-23 school year, we'll be doing a re-energizing of our math focus after the pandemic and reconnecting to all the good work that we started with the math focus task force that we conducted in the system. On the next slide, you'll see a focus in the area of reading. And the goal was to do pre and post assessments for marker students in senior kindergarten using Sound Foundation. And then we also used quick phonics screeners for our students in grade 1, 2, and 3. So in SK, there was a 58% increase of more than 10% on the screeners. Grade 1, an increase of more than 10% with 57% of the students. For grade 2, 64% with an increase of 10%. And grade 3, 52% increase by more than 10%. And you'll see in our operational plan that will be debuted later this month, a significant focus, as both my colleague and I have talked about in previous meetings, Superintendent Wilcox, in the area of the science of reading and high yield strategies and resources aligned to just that. In the next slide, you'll see we also did a litmus test in the area of looking at reading for our FI students. And it's important to note that the particular tool that we use here is called EDAPL. And it's important that it's a benchmark that increases significantly with complexity as it's used. So one of the things that we've done is we've made an application to the ministry to develop our own tool in collaboration with other boards and the support of psychometrics to help do that work. So we're hoping that that'll be approved and we're able to conduct that work this year. On the slide, you'll see that of the students that we looked at, that 35 of the students were at or above benchmark in the middle year, and then at the end of the year, 59 students met that benchmark, demonstrating an increase of 24 students at benchmark. That was specifically for letter naming fluency. For phonemic segmentation and fluency, a similar number of students were at or above benchmark. So at the middle, there was 95 students that were well below benchmark, but at the end of the year, it was only 72. So that decrease of 23 was improvement of students that had moved beyond the benchmark. And when we look at a word fluency in terms of correct letter sounds at the middle of the year, and this project occurred from the middle of the year to the end of the year based on specific funding we had, there were 37 students who were at or above benchmark, but at the end of the year, there were 48. On the next slide, we're looking specifically for students in grade 1. Again, using EDAPAL, and we were looking specifically at word fluency, specifically with what's called nonsense words. And at the middle of the year, we had 30 students who were at or above benchmark, and then we increased that to 47 by the end of the year, which was an increase of 17 students. And at the middle of the year, there were 129 students that were well below benchmark, but then we reduced that to 100 students. So that was an increasingly positive information. And then when we looked at grade 2 students, also in this same project, which is on the next slide, again, using EDAPAL, we looked at oral reading and retail skills. And at the middle of the year, 19 students were at or above benchmark. And at the end of the year, 41 were at or above that level, demonstrated an increase of 22 students. And at the middle of the year, there were 132 students that were well below benchmark, but with the intervention of intervention coaches and supports and the good work that teachers were doing in the classroom, that decreased by 22 students. And with that, I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Superintendent Canty, to continue the presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Howitt. And as Dr. Howitt said, the results from EQAO are embargoed, and so we don't have the results from our grade 9 math yet. The students are aware of how they did, as are the teachers, but the board and school results are not out yet. So what we looked at is what we're doing with one of our tools to improve numeracy, and that is Knowledge Hook. This is our usage data. We've got 45 teachers accessing the premium and secondary. That provides missions and games and practice on test material for the students. It also provides remedial materials for those students, so it's very responsive. Parents also have access to tutoring to close the gaps that are identified. Next slide, please. So Knowledge Hook is an instructional guidance system, and real-time support is what it's all about, practice and support through remediation. Next slide, please. So the content is developed by numeracy specialists, and you can see in the bottom corner of this slide the formative wheel, the formative assessment cycle, I should say. Sorry, it's in the top of this slide. And you can see how it's a matter of being responsive to where the gaps are and coming back and ensuring that the students get what they need. On the next slide, we have some challenges that we faced last year. Of course, we know about technology and getting it into students' hands. What our teachers have been doing is using the labs in the schools, taking students down to use the labs. Having trained teachers is always very important. Last year was difficult with OT coverage being a problem, but just this past week we had morning coverage for our new teachers to Knowledge Hook, and we took them through a session. And in the afternoon we had our more experienced teachers to take them through a session as well, so we can continue building the capacity of our teachers to use this very powerful tool. Next slide, please. So this afternoon, our team, Cal Pierce and Mark Berard, Mark Bodette, our math leads in the board, were able to meet with Knowledge Hook to learn about the tutoring tool, and Knowledge Hook is now going to craft language refs for us to use with parents and students and guardians so they can access the tutoring that comes with Knowledge Hook. Next slide, please. And I'm going to speak a little bit about literacy now. And again, much like EQAO math, our OSSLT results are embargoed until October. And so we are looking at the tools that we're using. And the tool we're using in secondary is Lexia Power Up. Next slide, please. As you can see, there are three, I'm sorry, back a slide. I missed that page, I'm sorry. There are three strands in Power Up that we use, to see where the students are and responsibly, again, go back and provide them with remedial materials. The strands are word study, grammar, and comprehension. And there's a QR code there if anyone's interested in seeing a video from Lexia on Power Up. Next slide, please. So again, the challenges were last year providing OT coverage for teachers. We have that now, so we're going to be continuing to help the teachers build their capacity on using Power Up. And as students get older, remediation sometimes gets more difficult because they might feel that they're being pulled out of classes to get remediation, and so that's one of the concerns. And of course, access to technology, as I mentioned earlier, with Knowledge Hook, it's the same with Lexia. We have to, get into those classrooms, and we need a minimum of 85 minutes per week to see the program really work for students. Next slide, please. Looking ahead, so how can we use Lexia in our de-streamed and single-stream classrooms? How can we use it with our English language learners, where we've had some success not only during the school year but during the summer? And how can we partner with parents, as I said earlier, to get them to use the tool at home? Next slide. So just want to show some successes from using it last year. So if you look at the movement from students, that's when students are moving up to intermediate or up to advanced. You can see in grade 9, we had a 10% increase overall. Grade 10, 8% increase. Grade 11, 8% increase. And grade 12 overall, a 15% increase for the students who used the tool. Next slide, please. And again, actually, this is that past slide was at Riverside in a 1P classroom. This slide here is for students in the grammar, and I'm sorry that you can see how the improvement was in terms of moving up from intermediate to advanced in each of those as well. For grade 9, 4%, grade 10, 4, 11% in grade 11, and 17% in grade 12. And for the final strand, reading comprehension, again, very proud to see the improvements for our students using the tool. 5% for grade 9, 4% for grade 10, 11% for grade 11 in reading comprehension, and grade 12 had 8%. And now we'll look at a couple of schools and how they did. Next slide, please. So at Riverside, this is the slide I thought I was on. There was 16 students in a 1P class, and you can see how they've improved. The units gained 24 units in word study, 14 units in grammar, 28 units in reading comprehension. And just to give you the time commitment there, it's basically 5 minutes per unit. So that's a testament to the hard work of those students and staff at Riverside. The next slide is Westview. We had a MAPS program there where the teacher used Lexia, and we had 46 units in word study. That's an improvement. Grammar, we went up 15 units, and reading comprehension, 46 units. So excellent job there at Westview. And the final one we're going to look at is Herman. And this is really, an incredible testament to the work being done by the teacher at Herman. You can see 215 units in reading comprehension. So that's an average of 17 hours. And so that's a teacher who has booked out, once a week, the lab, and brought his students down. And he's also a leader in terms of building capacity for other teachers. So that's at Herman. And I'll go to the next slide, please. Actually, now it's my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Superintendent Mike Wilcox, to talk about Lexia in elementary. Mike.
Good evening, everybody. So I just want to speak a little bit about our special education reading interventions and how we monitor them across the system. So I know I've presented on Lexia Core 5 to some of the trustees before, but if you're a new trustee, What is Lexia Core 5? It's an intuitive literacy program that accelerates the development of literacy skills. And one of the really great things about it is that it is it's very closely aligned to the science of reading, and is one of the interventions that's highly recommended by the Ontario Human Rights Commission's Right to Read report. So we are ecstatic to have it in all of our classrooms in elementary. Next slide. So how is Lexia Core 5 aligned to the science of reading? So it's explicit in that the concepts and skills are directly taught and practiced. It's systematic. It's a logically ordered presentation of concepts and skills that progresses from simple to complex. Cumulative in that it's new learning is built on prior learning. And diagnostic and responsive signifies the student's instructional needs are identified and instruction is designed accordingly. And so this is an online reading intervention, but it also requires the teacher to follow up, monitor student usage, and work with students one-on-one in mini lessons or one-to-one when a student is struggling with a concept. The teacher's dashboard actually alerts them to the struggle with the concept. So if the teacher's monitoring the dashboard, that helps them to meet the students' struggles. Next slide. So how do we use Lexia Core 5 in the Greater Essex County District School Board? It's our tier 2 reading intervention. We have Lexia Core 5 licenses available in all of our elementary schools. Licenses are assigned based on student numbers, grades 1 through 3. So we take the total of those number of students and we look at 15% of that. And those are the numbers that would require a tier 2 intervention on average. We also have licenses at regional for children who attend at Regional Children's Center. As students work independently in the online activities of Lexia's instructional programs, we get real-time performance data collected through the Lexia Embedded Assessment Tool. And educators can access data reports and instructional materials online, as well as monitor student usage, which is really important. Next slide. So if you look at this is progress in Core 5 during the 21-22 school year. So if you look at this, you'll see the start level on the left. I hope you can read it. Approximately 21% of students are either in student grade level at the start or reaching end of year benchmark. You'll notice down at the bottom, 48% of students are 2 or plus grade levels below. And then at the end of the school year, we see that 51% of students are in student grade or have reached end of year benchmark. And then only 21% of students are still 2 or plus grades below. We know that it's important that students meet their usage, and usage requirements are approximately 60 to 80 minutes per week. So we know that if we increase student usage, the impact will be greater and we can see even better results. Next slide. So our focus for Lexia next year is to have student use of Lexia to be continually monitored by our administrators. We have talked to school administrators and we have built in Lexia check-ins during our school visits by our area superintendents. And schools will continue with Lexia achievement celebrations. For those of you who are on Twitter, and you probably all are, you'll see some great opportunities the schools have taken to recognize students with their Lexia achievements in moving up from one, thank you, that's great, moving up from one level to the next. So in terms of the monitoring, Lexia gathers the student data and provides reports in real time. So we get an actual district report. I can ask for those at any time, or we can get them at the end of the school year to look at. Next slide. The next intervention I want to talk about is our Empower Reading program. It's developed by Sick Kids Hospital, their research team there, and it's based on at least 30 years of research. It's explicit teaching of skills and knowledge needed for decoding and comprehension of different types of text. Next slide. Who do we consider for the Empower Reading program? So we would look at students mainly in grade 3, but that doesn't mean that we wouldn't consider a grade 2 student or a grade 4 student, but grade 3 has usually been our focus. We look at students who have weak academic achievements, so their reading, writing, spelling skills are below grade level. They've had previous intervention, but without success. So maybe they were on Lexia, for instance, and didn't show the progress that we would normally like to see. We also look at the insight assessment results. So I'm probably sure that everyone here is aware of this, but we implement the insight assessment board-wide with all grade 2 students every year. And this is a cognitive test. And one of the scores we get out of it is crystallized knowledge. And if the score is below 69, those are students that are really good candidates for the Empower Reading Program. They may or may not be identified through the IPRC process. We don't make that mandatory. And they demonstrate a specific discrepancy between academic achievement and assessed intellectual ability. So kind of the ministry's profile of a learner with a learning disability. Next slide. So I just reached out to 5 schools to ask them for Empower data from the 21-22 school year. So here's a class at, for instance, John Campbell. The bar graphs are a little hard to see, so I'll kind of walk you through it. So we use the DRA to measure growth, so diagnostic reading assessment, and the DRA measures comprehension, vocabulary, and fluency. And so if you look at the first, so each of the 2 graphs represent 1 student. So if you look at the first student there, they are at a DRA that indicates they are at beginning grade 1. And by the end of the year, after the 110 lessons that the student participates in, it's 5 days a week. It's facilitated by a learning support teacher in a small group setting with up to 8 students. The student must complete all 110 lessons to get the total benefit of the Empower Reading Program. And what we pay for the Empower training, but along with the Empower training, we also get coaches from Empower that help our LSTs with the fidelity of the program moving forward. And so the second student there, the blue graph, shows that the student was at the end of kindergarten when they started, but by the time they completed their 110 lessons, which is about 10 months, they ended at grade 2. Third student, they were beginning at grade 1 and they finished at mid-grade 3. So they made a progress of approximately 2.5 school years. The fourth student, beginning grade 1, finished at mid-grade 3. They made a 2.5 progress in their reading literacy abilities. So, and then the final student there started at end of kindergarten, and by the end of the year, the 110 lessons, they finished at the end of grade 2. So as you can see, yeah, thank you. These are great results. We're, again, Empower is one of the reading interventions that is highly recommended by the Right to Read report by the Ontario Human Rights Commission, and we were very lucky to we've had Empower in our schools now for 8 or 9 years. Next, so I have there's 4 more slides. You can see they started in the blue, they ended in the orange. I don't want to go through every one of them, but as you can see, the progress that some of the students made, it's been absolutely fantastic. Next slide. And next slide, I like the heart. Next slide. And then the heart again, and next slide. So moving forward with Empower, Empower is not a license-based program, and it's delivered, as I said earlier, by the learning support teacher. Learning support teachers receive training by Sick Kids Empower facilitators, and there's a one-time cost in addition to purchasing the Empower kits. So the cost of training a teacher in Empower is $2,500, and the kit is $2,500. We get to keep the kits forever, and so far we've never had to replace them. So that's good news. Apparently the kits don't need updating. But it includes ongoing coaching and cyclical refresher training for everybody who's trained, just to guarantee the fidelity of the program as people move on. And so as LSTs retire, learning support teachers, we continue to train new LSTs, and we build this cost into the special education budget each year. There's incredible buy-in from our learning support teachers, and I would say to any trustee, if you're in one of our elementary schools, asked to speak to a learning support teacher and ask them about Empower. They are the biggest promoters and are very proud of the results of Empower. So we're very proud to have this Tier 3 intervention in our elementary schools. And to think of it, usually there's a maximum of 8 students in a group. And so when we initially started running it, it takes about a year. So we would actually change the trajectory for a minimum of 424 students if you look at 53 schools, 8 students. the LSTs see the value in it so much that they carve out time to deliver. Most of the schools are doing 2 Empower groups a year. So we're really proud of that work, and we're really proud of our LSTs who implement the program. The Empower, we do not get a district report around Empower. Empower results are gathered by LSTs, and they are housed at the school. But we are looking at a system-wide way to track that data through a platform called Clever, which we use for our IEPs. So that's about all I have to say about Empower. So we're happy to answer any questions right now. So please feel free to ask.
Thank you for that presentation. I think our students are so fortunate to have that intensive support for their math and literacy skills. Are there any questions from any of the trustees? I see Trustee Chin.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. My question is regarding the mathematics. It says on the PowerPoint, its goal is over 75% of students will demonstrate an increase greater than 2 points between the pre and post assessment. I have a question. What's the pre and post assessment? Is that pre assessment is at the beginning of the semester and post assessment is at the end of the semester? If it's that way, I see a great percent of students they didn't increase at all. So I don't know if my understanding is correct for the mathematics.
So I'll respond to that. I think you're referring to the slide that's specifically for elementary, and the goal was 75% of students would demonstrate that increase of 2 points in the pre and post. The pre is done in the fall, and the post is done in the spring. We didn't reach our goal of 75%, but in each grade, they were either between 60.6 and up to 64.3 of the students increased by 2 points. So although we didn't reach the 75%, a good number of students did increase significantly.
Oh, can I have a supplemental?
Sure, go ahead.
Oh, yes. What's the score range? Is for example, SK is 19.5 out of what? I mean the score, and I'm just curious why a certain amount of students after one semester they didn't increase at all.
So there's 2 different tools that are used for SK. It was the screener that we borrowed from another board from Hastings Prince Edward. And then there was a pre and post with a tool called Prime for the primary grades. So it's based on those tools, if the point range of whatever it might be, and then that increase. So I think you're asking that you would have liked to have seen a greater percent. I'm reporting to you that over 60% of the students in each of those grades did increase by 2 points.
Yeah, I understand. I just want to have an idea. The 2 points out of what? To my impression is that after a whole semester in mathematics, I expect a greater increase. And but it's just 2 points, and only 60% increase 2 points. So a certain amount of students, grade 2, like 18% students, they didn't increase at all. So it makes me feel uncomfortable about the mathematics. After one semester, they didn't increase at all. So I am wondering if there is any issue with the teaching in mathematics.
So I think if I'm understanding your question correctly, 2 points isn't a percentage. It's based on the level of the tool. And I don't have the tool in front of me to be able to tell you exactly how many points, but 2 points is significant within the tools that were used. It's not a percentage point, Trustee Chin. It's based on the tools that were used. And I'm sorry I don't have the tools in front of me to be able to give you that point range, but the goal is always selected in that it would be stretching to achieve, but achievable, right? So the achievement that was done was considerable in that time frame. And I see your point that more students can improve, and that remains our goal. Remember, we were in a 2-year pandemic and professional development wasn't available to teachers, although teachers worked earnestly to provide quality programming to their students. We're recommitting this year to the great work that occurred during the math task force. And in fact, training starts as early as next week with mathematics professional development for teachers and school teams.
Oh, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Trustee Burgess, do you have a question?
I do, for clarification, if I could. I have a couple, so I will wait in line if anybody else does. Earlier in the presentation, Superintendent Howitt, you talked about an assessment that was on thinking, and I've never seen it put quite so succinctly. So how do we assess thinking?
That's based on the Ontario curriculum and assessment. So we think we go on communication and application and thinking. So it's based on the Ontario writing assessment to look at the development of ideas and their communication thereof in their writing. So the Ontario writing assessment tool called OWA is designed with a prompt to look for just that in the student writing samples. And we actually collect samples based on a similar prompt to all grade 2 and grade 7 students. We collect a do an evaluation of that's actually looking at the qualitative assessments, and then go back with another prompt in the spring and do that. So it looks for communication, application, thinking.
That's very cool. Can I ask a second question, quite separate? See if there's anybody else.
Of course.
The other question was Superintendent Wilcox, you shared it. It's about insight, and I think it used to have a different name prior, but we haven't really had a discussion about that in some time, and I wanted to know, because as I remember, it's grade 2, and I thought it was a normed thing, which is kind of an unusual thing, and it's an optional thing. Not all boards use that assessment in grade 2, and why do we invest in it, and why do we find it helpful, or how do we find it helpful?
Well, it provides us with so it is the insight test, and we were able to facilitate the test this past, so we usually run it in around February, March each year. We were able to facilitate the test being taken in 2022. We were also able to facilitate it being taken in 2020 because it was just before COVID really, happened. It was growing in momentum. But then we didn't run the CAT 4 test or the insight test in 2021 due to COVID. So it's a cognitive test. It provides a lot of information. Like I said, different scores in different categories. So the crystallized knowledge is a big predictor of reading. So we use those. The results are sent to schools, and they use it for programming for students. And one of the things that they can use the test for, there's numerous things. Obviously, program planning for individual students for grade 3, but also things such as identifying students who are gifted.
Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Trustee Halverstadt.
Thank you. There was a couple of mentions about the pandemic and the impact of the pandemic. So I wonder if Mike or Clara could talk about that. You hear on the street and news releases, etc., news stories that we'll never catch up, put everybody behind 2 years. Have we measured that at all about catching up to what it should be after the pandemic?
So I can start that answer. I don't think we'll fully realize the impact of the pandemic until sometime down the road. And I'll give you the example of the mathematics improvement too. Like, think about the improvement of students in that period. This was last year when there was an introduction back to the return to school, even though there were interruptions at points. That processes that we used in teaching and learning mathematics that include manipulatives and communication of knowledge with and among students was very hard to occur when we were disconnected from school or in an online experience. So I don't know if we'll really fully understand the true impact of it, because remember also our EQAO scores are coming in a different, the test was delivered in a different format last year. So we're starting from ground zero again with the reporting of those performance scores at the end of this month. So it's not like we're looking at exactly the same process previously, although there would be some comparative. The assessment was conducted virtually for the first time this year. So we know it's at an impact because kids were either disconnected or disengaged. I'm not saying all students by any means. And although there were valiant efforts from teachers all around the world to do good work, it was challenging. And so clearly at the beginning of this year, there's been a recommitment and energy to be face-to-face with students, and everybody is feeling better about that. Although, there's been challenges even with reentry for, coming back after a 2-year period, so to speak, to some quote unquote normalcy or a new way of being. But nothing's better than having the kids face-to-face, and everybody's committed to doing the work, right? I can't speak to what that impact is, although, like, you are correct. And much of the theorists are saying that it's going to be a significant impact. Just don't know what that is. It remains to be seen. And more data along the way will help us in better understanding that. But anecdotally, staff have been telling us that one of the biggest areas of need is in reading with kids. Right. And so I'm really excited. Both Superintendent Wilcox and myself are super excited about the work in the area of the science of reading, because that's probably the most evident area in the elementary panel as to support for students in an area of need. I hope that helps.
I think just a supplementary. What about secondary? They're looking at. You hear a lot about they're looking at grade 11 to 12. And they've had gaps of a year, and now they're expected to go and perform in university. What is the impact of that then, and what does it continue to be impacted if so?
I'm looking to Josh if you'd like to answer that.
Yeah, I can jump in there. So we know, our teachers know that there are gaps, and they're working hard, as Dr. Howitt said, and we can see through some of the results, not only through Power Up and Lexia, but Knowledge Hook, that we can close gaps. And I know that the students are doing their very best, and our teachers are doing their very best. And as Dr. Howitt said, we won't really know for years what the effects are, but all we can do is do the work.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? I don't see any. I do have one. It was mentioned in the one slide about Empower that it is mainly used for grade 3. But touching on what Trustee Halberstadt was talking about and what Dr. Howitt, we might not know for years about the effect that the pandemic has and continues to have on students. So if a student is in grade 4, 5, 6 and still needs to utilize Empower, is that being offered to those students, or will that be offered to the students, or is there some other kind of intervention that can be brought in for that kind of mid-range between the primary and the senior years of elementary school? Like, is there a cutoff?
There's
or
no
what
real
supports?
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go for it.
That's a great question. Thank you, Trustee Mossad. The focus is grade 3. As I said earlier, we have moved it down to grade 2 for some students. We've moved it to grade 3. I have seen where we have had a grade 6, 7, and a grade 7 student also in Empower in some of our groups in our elementary school. The only caution is that we want to be careful about how the student feels about being maybe with some younger students. But for the most part, it's an excellent intervention. Obviously, the research is there. Obviously, the data is there. Would we consider older students? We would. It just depends on the profile. We usually have people, our psychological services staff, come in and help us determine what would help those students. But we have had some older students in Empower.
Yeah, I could just kind of just looking to the future. I am imagining that in order for everyone to catch up, if there's catching up to do, that these programs will be very useful in the upcoming years for all grade levels. So I just wanted to ensure that those students, you know, that might need that little extra help, that aren't the younger learners but aren't quite in high school yet, that there is something available for them in the grade 5, 6, 7 years, because formative years were missed, right? Grade 1, 2, 3 for a lot of students. So that takes you into that age group.
And if I can just add to that, we do obviously there's been funding provided this year from the ministry for tutoring, and so last year we did a pilot with some of our self-identified Indigenous students who are in intermediate grades with the Empower programming. This year we're also going to be running some tutoring for our self-identified Indigenous students and self-identified Black students who will have an opportunity to use Lexi in grade 7 and 8 as an intervention, helping to prepare them or support them as they move into high school.
Oh, excellent news. Thank you so much.
You're
so welcome. One more time, are there any other questions about this presentation? I don't see any hands.
Excuse me.
Trustee Chin, do you have one additional question before we move on?
I'm not sure if this question is within this range, but when I go canvassing, I did talk with a teacher, retired teacher. She mentioned important issue. She said that currently the students, even if they cannot pass the test and they didn't improve at all, and we still send the students to the next level, you know, next grade. So this kind of gap accumulated, and finally, you know, many students, they cannot catch up at all. So our concern is that is that a good way to you know, to arrange the students, or if we can bring back some kind of standard, and if the student didn't pass the requirement, and they will have to stay on the, you know, previous grade and until they catch up and go to the higher level. I'm not sure if this can be answered here.
I'm not sure that this has to do with the presentation at hand. Does anyone on senior administration like to give a quick comment, or maybe this could be during trustee question period, Trustee Chin?
Okay, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, no. Okay, so moving on to the next presentation, we have an update about the summer learning for 2022.
Josh is going to start off this presentation. Superintendent Canty.
Thank you, Clara. I wasn't sure of the order. So I will start the presentation. If we could flip to the next slide, please. Great. So the first piece of summer learning I wanted to share was our second year of math mindsets. And so before I do that, though, I believe what I'm going to do on the next slide is just show how we did overall in summer school. And there we have it. Thank you. So In terms of the students enrolled, you can see in the first column, and the credits issued is in the following column. And we did a really successful summer in terms of the 1,134 students who were enrolled. They were able to earn, I should say, 1333. And the reason why there's so many more is the dual credits and co-op. Next slide, please. And so I'd like to start by featuring Reaching Ahead. This is our eighth year that we've done Reaching Ahead. 283 students this year. And again, this is for their students to get, the grade 8 students get their first high school credit, and to get them accustomed to being at the high school that they're going to go to. The program, of course, was designed 8 or 9 years ago by our teacher consultant for literacy, Jason Lin, and it's really great PD for our teachers. We have 5 teachers this year that were new to the program, and so all of the teachers, when they take this, because of Jay's background in terms of pedagogy, they always take away something that they can bring into the new school year for their students. So next slide, please. So the slides you'll see here are the schools that we're able to reach. So we're actually 4 sections at Massey, and I was unable to slip the KCI. Kennedy also had a section there. Next slide, please. This is a student, and I'll just let you read what the student said from Miss John's sandwich section. The student was clearly happy that they could acclimatize to their new high school. The next slide, we have at Riverside, a student. Oh, I'm sorry, this is not Riverside. This is also at Massey, and some of the students were able to go out and be good citizens and be good neighbors and clean up around the area. Next slide, please. There's a quote from our Riverside student. A student that obviously would just be doing sports or video games, but was pleased to do a little academics over the summer, so we're pleased to see that. Next slide, please. And this is actually a video. If we could play Emma from Vista.
Hi, my name is Emma Carroll, and this is my business, Dream Job, Dream Possible. My business is destined to help you, a grade 9 through 12 student, find and prepare for your first part-time job. I will make all the stress of both finding and preparing for your first part-time job go away. Before we start stressing out about preparing for a job, we have to find one first. Here are the 9 essential skills. Which ones do you have? Based on the skills you have, you can find a job that would be a good fit for you. If you have good communication skills and you have good digital skills, then you could probably go into taking orders because your skill set proves that you can do that.
Clearly, Emma could do my job with her communication skills. Next slide, please.
Hi, my name is Emma Carroll,
and this is a couple students from Vincent Massey.
I enjoyed it. The teachers were great. The material was fantastic. I learned a lot about Massey and how high school works and what to do in the future.
I also learned a lot. I made so many new friends. I can't wait to see next year when the school year starts. I think it helps you a lot because the teachers here, they're actual high school teachers and they know what they're talking about.
Very good. And the next slide, we actually have some quotes from some of our teachers themselves. And I like that, we have the student voice, now we have the teacher voice. And as I said, there's so many research-based strategies that are embedded in the Reaching Ahead program. So these teachers take a lot away and they can bring that to our students. So thank you for that, Jason Lin. And the next slide, please. So this is about our math program. We had it last year for the first time. Math Mindsets, we called it. We just called it the Summer Math Program this time around. We had 3 sections. This is year 2. The content was provided mostly by Mark Baudet and Kyle Pierce, our teacher consultant for mathematics. The focus was on math talks, problem-based lessons using Knowledge Hook, as we discussed earlier, and learning through context. Next slide, please. So there were 3 sections, as I said earlier, and it was really about practice and feedback, continuous teacher feedback, and there was time built in before the math program and each day at the end of the day for the teachers to get together and see what worked well, what didn't go well, what they could do to improve the next day for the students. Next slide, please. So the 73% of the students felt that the strategies helped them better understand math. And you can see on the last bullet there, 60% of the students felt more prepared for their grade 9 math class. Next slide, please. Looking back at last year's math program over the summer, we're pleased to report that 100% of the students who took this program passed their D-Stream grade 9 math. And so it works, and we're very pleased, and we're going to run it again next year. Next slide, please. And this last piece just shows about student confidence, and one of our system priorities is creating confident learners. And if our grade 8 students going into grade 9 are confident about math, that has a lot to do with their success moving forward. Next slide, please. I believe this is Dr. Howitt.
Yes, thank you very much, Superintendent Canty. And so I'm really excited to report about our Camp Wonder program, which has been now 12 years in existence. And the big focus of the summer learning program is reducing the summer learning slide. So where there is a need and you provide focused intervention, even in a short period of time, it can have significant impact. So one of the major targeted actions is not just whole group instruction, but in particular small group instruction. There's a focus on well-being and movement and improved healthy eating, and breakfast, hearty breakfast programs, and really healthy snack programs. We interweave the importance of character traits, and the focus this year was resiliency, responsibility, and respect. We have very strong build and reinforce strong caregiver partnerships with families. And then we've also enriched the afternoon session with STEAM opportunities. And a big part of this work is obviously reducing that summer learning slide, but it's also about building public confidence in public education. On the next slide, you'll see that while our programs continue to diversify and grow, we have 9 camps that we offered this past year, 8 elementary and 1 secondary under Camp Wonder, so to speak. And our 2 newest ones are Camp Mkeka and Camp Nia that Josh is going to report on a little bit later in the presentation. In the next slide, I want to start off with a huge thank you to having almost 700 students in the program. And I want to thank families that entrusted their children to the Greater Essex this summer in the Camp Wonder program. And I really want to thank the staff as well. Almost over 100 staff were aligned to this program. It's a short, intense program, and we need the manpower to make it work. And they did an outstanding job. So something we did a little bit different this year is we did hubs. So it wasn't at each individual school. We hubbed the schools, and you'll see at the bottom of the slide there that we included schools, hubs at Brock, Westgate, Dougal, John Campbell, Herman, Begley, Bellwood, Legacy Oak, and Lakeshore Discovery. On the next slide, you'll see that the format or structure of the day started with an arrival at 8:30. Often the caregiver, family member would walk in with the child. There were days that the parent and caregiver stayed for the breakfast and were included in the learning, but generally students came in, got settled, had a good breakfast, and then engaged in 3 hours of instruction, right, in the area of literacy and numeracy. And there were interspersed moments of DPA for them. There was a lunch that was provided from our community partners, free lunches. And then we had also our STEAM and DPA and movement in the afternoon. On the next slide, you'll see that we incorporated STEAM opportunities, specifically Scientists in Schools, Arts Can Teach, which is an outstanding partner, Life Stories, and the WSO series, and Science for Us. As well as activities that were facilitated by the homeroom teachers, and then the absolutely outstanding revitalization and recommitment to the string project at both Brock and Begley, and absolutely outstanding what happened with those students. And then the impact on student achievement in terms of the focus that we had in the area of literacy. We focused on word recognition in all of the camps that are listed there, and the majority of the students were assessed using the quick phonics screeners, and in kindergarten they use Sound Foundation. So I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Superintendent Wilcox, to share a little bit more on the detail of performance.
Yeah, next slide, please. When we look at impact on student achievement, and as Superintendent Howard said, one of the things that was targeted in Camp Wonder was word recognition. So interventions included phonological routines, SOAR and Lexia skill builders, decodable books, systematic sequential phonics programming. So if we look at the number, when we look at the number of students, the number of marker students was 156, and those were mostly grade 1 and 2 students. The percentage of students who demonstrated growth was 86%, and average growth was 22%. And then for the sound foundations, which was used with our kindergarten students, number of marker students was 20, percentage of student who demonstrated growth was 85%, and average growth was 34%. And I think we have to remember when we look at those average growth rates, this is a 3-year program, right? So it was very well done. Next slide. These results are from Camp Discovery. Our Camp Discovery, those are students who usually come, who are a RISE profile. So many of them are in our RISE classrooms. They may have a designation of learning disability or a mild intellectual disability. The interventions, so we looked at phonological awareness and phonics skills. Those were our targets. We used the Quick Phonics Screener as our assessment. Our interventions included Haggerty, the Flyleaf readers, which helps to build student comprehension, Lexia Core 5, of course, and SOAR practices. And so the number of marker students was 40, percentage of students who demonstrate growth was 93%, and the average growth for this group was 8%, and we were very proud of that growth. Next slide, please. So the students enrolled in Camp Lingo were in grades 4 to 6, and were all multilingual learners. These camps focused additionally on oral language comprehension. So when we look at oral language comprehension, the intervention was mentor texts. And so the number of marker students was 14. The percentage of students who demonstrated growth was 57, and the average growth was 23%. And again, this is over a 3-week period, so those are great results. Then we also in Camp Wonder, they look at number, sense, and operation. And so students were assessed using leaps and bounds, grades 1 and 2. This was interventions included mathology, mini lessons, small group instruction using leaps and bounds again. And so when we look at the assessments results, when we look at leaps and bounds for addition, 96% of markers, so 96 of the marker students, 51% demonstrated growth for an average growth of 24%. And then the assessment for that focused on subtraction, number of marker students, again, 96, percentage of students who demonstrated growth, 68%, and average growth, 34%. And again, I want to remind people out there watching that this was a program. When we see that kind of growth, it was over 3 weeks. So that's excellent. Educator feedback. Upon completing the summer learning program, teachers were asked if they believed that the program goals were achieved. 99% of educators believe that the goals were met or exceeded. Of the educators that responded, 91% said they'd return to the program in the 2023 school year. And I just want to share just a personal piece. I ran into one of the teachers who was at Camp Megasay, and they told me that even if they retired, they would come back and teach these programs, because they said they've been doing it for a number of years, and the professional development that they receive before going in and implementing these programs was phenomenal. So you know what, when she retires, I'm going to hold her to it. We're going to find her and have her come back. So, but the educator feedback was phenomenal. Next slide, please. So in terms of parent feedback, there were lots of ways that we gathered parent feedback: through surveys, through classroom visits, through regularly scheduled communication with parents, which is one of the must-dos in the program. Teachers were expected to reach out to parents on a regular basis and have communication with them around their child's progress. So here's some of the parent feedback. She loves her teachers, loves to learn, loves meeting the special guests, loved the parent engagement, loved all her old friends and new ones too. As a parent and a newly widowed parent, I appreciate the breakfast program and lunch program. I can't thank you enough for doing this for my daughter and all the children. My daughter loved it. She was thrilled to go every day. She's reading more and her math skills have improved far beyond what I would imagine this summer. And the last one there, my daughter enjoyed absolutely everything. She especially enjoyed the baking and science activities. She didn't truly realize how much she was learning. Also, in terms of parent feedback, parents and guardians were asked to identify whether or not various aspects of the program met or exceeded their expectations. 99% of parents, guardians indicated that the program in general met or exceeded their expectations. 99% of parents or guardians indicated that the parent-caregiver communication and engagement met or exceeded their expectations. 99% indicated that their child was engaged, and 99% were satisfied with the STEAM component. 98% of parents, caregivers indicated they would enroll their child again next year. And I have to say, and I know that Dr. Howitt would echo this as well, in the times that I visited the programs over the 3 weeks, there were constantly parents there. I think they really enjoyed actually being part of the summer learning programs when they were invited in, and there was lots of opportunities, especially in Camp Discovery, for parents to learn about the profiles of their students and how they learn. So it was very, very successful. So from a parent and educator perspective, our summer learning programs were extremely successful, and we really look forward to next summer. And I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Candy for the last piece.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Wilcox. So we ran our first Black camps at Herman, Camp Makeka and Camp Nia. We had 39 students, 1 administrator, 4 educators, 2 Create Your Future advisors, and 1 researcher. And also in the picture is Dr. Allen from the University of Windsor, who was there each day supporting us. Next slide, please. So the focus, as with our other camps, was on literacy and numeracy, but also contribution of local Black citizens, how to deal with anti-Black racism, Black student advocacy, and self-love. Next slide, please. So the staff for the program were exclusively Black, and the focus was on empowerment, mindfulness, literacy, and math, as I stated earlier. Next slide. On this slide, we surveyed parents, as we did with other camps, at the end of Makeka and Nia, and we're pleased to report that 100% of the parents felt that the program either met or exceeded the expectations of the program. Next slide, please. Here's some of the quotes from parents on their exit surveys. I'll give you a moment to look at those. There's a lot of positive messaging about some of the guest speakers, local Black entrepreneurs, lawyers, doctors that we had come in to speak to the students. One was Ray Taylor, a local entrepreneur, who attended the last segregated school in our area, SS number 11. And he shared his own story of resiliency and eventual success as a local entrepreneur and business owner. Next slide, please. So the parents most enjoyed the fact that they were learning about members from the community that were Black and successful, understanding past and present successes of Black people, and a close third was feelings of achievement, well-being, and self-love. Next slide, please. I'm sorry, I should go back a slide just to explain what the pictures are a little bit. So in the top picture there, the staff took the students to the grocery store and did some measurements and explained. They went back and created some dishes, but they also explained why the fresh foods are on the outside of the supermarket and why the processed and packaged foods are on the inside of the supermarket. Things like that the kids may not have known. And there's the Amherstburg Freedom Museum in the bottom slide there. Next slide, please. And this is a slide about our staff. And again, 100% felt that we either met or exceeded the goals of the program. And I'll give you a moment just to read the quotes. Next slide, please. And this, just last week, we had, again, we leaned on our our teacher consultant for literacy, Jason Lynn, to go out and see Ronnie Jeffrey at Herman. He was one of the Create Your Future advisors, and they created this video for us. Please.
around, it was a really fun experience. I got to engage with a whole bunch of new people, and I was just around a lot of new role models.
But Dr. Allen, he was great with everybody. So me and my friend actually had like an hour conversation with him after camp ended. We were telling him about our future, our life goals, and he was giving us tips on how to actually achieve that. Whether it's the college we go to, university we go to, what class we need to take in high school, or even my friend wanted to go pursue athletics, and he's telling him, keep your grades right, make sure you're doing this, doing that, and it really helped him.
It was such a comfortable community. Like, we were all together with younger kids. Every single activity we did, every time we ate, every time I was just around someone who looked like me, acted like me, you know, even when we talked the same way, it just felt whole.
We had this one activity where we were doing basketball golf. So the older students would set the activity up, and then the younger students would come in, and the older students would lead them around and try to help them go through the activity, and they'd compete against each other, and we'd all bond at that same time. And the main thing was that the older students need to provide a good role model for the younger students, and that they can look up to us and always feel comfortable around us. One of the kids was grade 8 going into grade 9 at the camp, and we first met him through the camp, and then now the first day he came into high school, you could clearly tell he was comfortable. Everyone knew him, everyone was just bonding with him, and if he ever needed any help, he'd come ask us, feel comfortable, and it was just a great experience for him to learn before coming into high school.
I think something that stood out was definitely the math part of it, where they taught us that math, you know, is all over. And I think that part was also very important to little kids because, you know, math is something that some people find very difficult, and it's something that some people like shy away from.
I had Jamaican food for the first time. I had Jamaican patties with rice and chicken, and it was literally so delicious. And even when we did this activity where we went to the grocery store and we were put into groups, we started to understanding more of our nutrition, because, you know, we're growing, and there's a lot of younger kids too, so it's very important to learn that.
So we did a timeline where they told us a little bit about Black history over time, you know, in Canada. And I think it's very important for people to know their history because it gives you a sense of identity, and it kind of like allows you to know where you come from. Not having that sense of identity can be very difficult. So I think the fact that they gave us an opportunity to, you know, learn a little bit more about that it helped. And we also went on a field trip where they showed us, you know, videos, and they had some people speaking to us at this museum where they told us about, you know, Black history and, you know, the things that our people had to go through. I think that was very important, and it was very nice to see and, you know, be educated on.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Clemens, and I had 4 children that went. 3 started the first week, and then they talked about it so much that my other son wanted to come in and give it a try. As a white mother, single mom, I can't teach them the exact same way that they would learn from their peers or from adults that look like them. And learning their history is always important, and they love the field trip. Just seeing, like, it was like a hands-on involvement of being almost like they were walking in the shoes of, right, their ancestors. And they just that part of the learning was really good. The kids always talked about the staff and how great they were, and I was always welcome for my input. Or the last day they had like a little graduation ceremony that parents could attend, and it was great seeing the joy in all the parents' faces when they see their child walking across and getting their little diplomas, and it was just really nice. It was a nice way to end summer.
So the community building portion was amazing because we had a lot of successful Black community partners that came in and gave a lot of examples to the students about career paths and how they can get to those career paths, or what they overcame as a Black person in those career paths. I really enjoyed working with the students because it helped me build a rapport with some of the grade 8s coming into our building that maybe I may not have had an opportunity to meet prior to. And so now them coming into grade 9, they have a familiar face, as well as the students that were within the community that came to the program as well.
I'm thinking about going into something like biology because I'm leaning more towards the medical side towards things. So I'm thinking of like maybe nursing.
For me, I want to be a software engineer, so I'm looking to do computer science in university.
I was definitely thinking of going into something with the sciences, mainly forensic science, because everyone thinks science is just in one whole category, but there are so many different paths. So I'm just curious with all of us.
Thank you. And one thing to close about that, we were able to start our Black Student Advisory Council, and many of the students came from the camp since our CYF advisors could reach out and find them now and bring them to us. So we started that last week with a presentation here at the board office, and we look forward to moving forward. And looks like we're ready for any questions you have about any of our summer programs.
Thank you so much for that presentation. Reading the slides on your own is one thing, but seeing that video and seeing the students and the parents and the staff talking about it is quite another. So that's amazing. That's all I can say. I loved that presentation so much. Do I have any questions from my colleagues? I see Trustee Chin.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I see these programs are wonderful, and the parents are and the students are all satisfied. I'm just wondering, those programs are not available for all the students, right? They are just for targeted, groups. And I wonder if in the future, if there are more students, if they want to join the camps, they will have the opportunity. Is that possible? Thank you.
I can start if I may. This year was our first year for having Black camps, and I just like to say publicly thank you to Dr. Clara Howitt, who really, seeing what we've done with our Indigenous camps in the past, brought up the idea like we should be doing this for Black students too. So finally in the year 2022, we were able to do that. Thank you for the insight of Dr. Howitt, and I don't see any reason why we can't have more camps for other students. So thank you for the question, Trustee Chin.
Oh, thank you. So is that possible for? Oh, sorry. Can I ask supplemental? Oh,
it's tied to that question, Trustee Chin?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just wondering if in the future, and all the students, if they want to join a summer camp, they will have chance to do that, or it's not possible. We don't have enough resources to do that.
I'll answer that question, and thank you. The camps are popular, but the originating program that started 12 years ago with Camp Wonder through the funding from the Council of Directors of Education was specifically targeted to level 2 students and reducing that summer learning slide, and so the funding is targeted specifically to that. I think the idea of having more camps is a wonderful idea, but we need to ensure that we have the infrastructure in terms of sustainability and funding to be able to do that. So potential growth is there, but it needs to be aligned to dollars to make that happen.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Burgess, I see that you have your hand up. And Trustee Halberstadt, you could be next, okay?
Thanks, Madam Chair. We have other areas than the City of Windsor that have, demonstrated need based on either EQAO or things that we learned from like Prosperous, etc. And I would like to ask specifically about, are there any visions of, since now we have considered using schools a hub, in other words, for school to house a few of these programs, perhaps. whether Leamington or areas of Essex have been identified, for example, within Prosperous as having a definite need and somewhere we need to build confidence in public education, etc. Is there any chance of having summer programs in the county?
I can start off that response. We have had summer programs in the county in previous years through Camp Wonder. This year, there was a challenge with ensuring the number of staff and requests out in the county for students. So remember, this was a reentry year, right? Although they're popular, a lot of families were looking to just relax after the stress of the last 2 years too. And we do have partnerships with the United Way and programs like Prosperous. So there is potential to reintroduce the opportunity into subsequent years for sure. But traditionally, we have offered programs in the Leamington area.
Thank you.
Trustee
Madam
Halberstadt.
Chair? Yeah, I just, on the same lines as Trustee Chin, obviously can't take the whole student body into these summer camps, but how does that work? Is there a capacity where they say we can handle so many, we have so many teachers, we can have 30 students or whatever, where they might have to turn people away that apply to get into summer school, or how does that work? And would students be turned away after a certain period of time or a deadline, or where we talked about how many other, what's the capacity and what happens with people that cannot be accommodated because of the dollars?
I'll let my colleague, Superintendent Canty, speak to summer school, but for Camp Wonder during the pandemic, we were able to innovate and reach more students. Prior to, Camp Wonder was limited to the schools that we offered it to, and it was based on specific information as outlined from the transfer agreement with the Council of Directors of Education. So this year we wanted to do more. We didn't have the capacity for more staff again, and to be fair to staff after 2 long years of contending with the challenges of the pandemic. It was harder to find staff this summer, but I imagine there will be a recommitment to the opportunity. People like to work in the program because there's huge benefits in the program, and I've had teachers who have been in their retiring years say it's the best learning they've done in their whole career. So again, I think this last year was an anomaly, but what we look to do is offer it to as many students as we possibly can and leverage it. In fact, we have the largest allocation in the province.
And I'll piggyback on that, Dr. Howard, with the critical mass, like where the kids are, that's where we generally have our summer school. And there's also other variables such as construction. So we might have it at Kennedy 1 year because there's construction at Westview or vice versa. And we need administration at summer school. And so, it's just a matter of where we place it. And there's a lot more students in the city. One good piece is in terms of student need and student desire, we did have our first Reaching Ahead at Essex this year, the first one we were able to offer because there were so many students interested out there. Thank you.
And just in terms of Camp Discovery, this is only our 3rd year running this camp. The first 2 years it was virtual, and this is the first year running it in person. And so what we ended up doing was reaching out. Our learning support teachers reached out to parents of students who are in the RISE program. So our camp is specifically for students with a RISE profile, but certainly we would look at expanding the camps as well.
Thank you.
Trustee Cook, I have you next on the list.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just wondering, is transportation offered for these camps?
Thank you for the question. No, transportation is not part of the agreement for the funds provided. In circumstances for, in particular, First Nation students, we do offer support that way.
So for some of, I mean, for me anyways, the way I'm thinking is that there's a pretty big group of students that could really, really benefit from this. And because of transportation, I mean, that's a huge barrier. So I'm just wondering if there was anything that we could do. You know, do we have any options or anything to help these students be able to enjoy and, you know, learn at these camps and just feel a part of?
So it's certainly an opportunity to explore, but the funding that comes aligned to support the camps at this time does not permit it. But it's something we can look into. But we have to make sure that whatever we offer is not cost prohibitive. And I see Josh had his hand up, so I'm sorry.
Thank you, Doctor. I was just going to add that we did offer one section of Reaching Ahead virtually because there was interest in a few of the county schools that we could not. You know, lessons learned from COVID, we can do that now. But obviously, we know that learning in person is the best for our students.
Trustee Hatfield, do you have a question?
Thank you. Yeah, I guess it's supplementary to the one just asked by Trustee Cook. Yeah, so it is too bad that there isn't transportation provided, because it would probably make a huge difference on the number of students that could participate. But I just wanted to clarify that I heard that for the Indigenous programming, there is transportation. And is that because there's a special funding allocated for that isn't available to all students? Is that why?
It's offered if it is needed for a specific family, and we do have some provisions to be able to assist with that.
But just for Indigenous students?
Yeah. So removing a barrier to ensure that they have the learning opportunity, yes.
So is that from a special pool of money? Because I'm sure other students have that same barrier, but they aren't Indigenous.
Yeah, it's with the Indigenous dollars that we have. We hold a slot.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to clarify. Yeah, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any further questions related to this presentation? I do not see any, so I'd like to say thank you very, very much for that. I truly appreciated it. Moving on, there were no delegations at the time of the agenda prep. There is no one on the speakers list. There's no new business. So moving on to agenda item K, reports to be received. We did have a report included in our trustee package, a report on the Indigenous and Black Student Voice Forum. Is there someone from administration who'd like to speak on this? Or...
Thank you.
Of course.
In the package, starting on page 5 and 6, there's a cover page to the Indigenous, Black, and Student Voice Forum report. It's really focused on an opportunity to gather and respond to student voice. It is in response to an action item that we included in our 2021-22 Board Improvement Plan, Board Improvement and Equity Plan. 57 students participated in this study, and you'll see that a lit review and methodology is included. And there's a highlight of coded big ideas that were then clustered into reflections that were provided from the students. And if you have any questions, I'm very pleased to do my best and answer them for you.
Are there any questions from any of the trustees? I am not seeing any in the chat. Oh, Trustee Burgess, your hand just went up.
I have a question about the use of the words critical race theory. It's a very triggering, word. It's misunderstood, I think greatly misunderstood. And I wonder why we would choose to use that, because I think it is more misunderstood than understood.
So critical race theory as part of the methodology is really underscoring that racism is a social construct, and that when you look at the structures within our social construct as a community, that Eurocentric perspectives, ideals permeate different systems. And whether it be the education system, the labor market, the health system, the judicial system, what it does is this study aligned with a collection of student voice that are sharing their narrative and identifying where they see those either implicit or explicit different rules for different people. So the idea is identifying and calling it for the purpose of trying to restore or rebuild a different way of being based on the voice that's elicited by students.
So I guess we own it, and that's good. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Are there any further questions for my colleagues regarding this report?
I had one, Trustee Olmsted. I just raised my hand.
Oh, sorry, Trustee Sakar, I missed that.
That's okay. Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. So I noted that there was a number of reflections that were itemized at the end. And I noted that they were reflections and not necessarily actions, but it says that they do relate to student support, inclusion, and representation within the GEDDSB. I'm just wondering what's kind of the next steps with this report. I thank you for how comprehensive it is, and I actually haven't really had the opportunity to really digest it fully based on my read of it. And so I'm just curious, what are the next steps, and will we be seeing any sort of actions that stem from this?
Yes, thank you for the question. The idea when we approach the students and ask them to participate is we will be circling back to the students that participated. You're the first to see this report that we've shared publicly. We haven't shared it with the students yet because we're using the data that's been mined from their voices, what they have identified as either big ideas or reflections, to help with the development of the building of the operational plan and the board improvement plan, board improvement and equity plan, the BEEP, for the 2022-23 school year. Because it's one thing to ask, it's another thing to respond to what students are saying. So the goal is then to share with other groups and then circle back with the students around some actions based on what they've shared. So that's the idea of leading to action. And we promised that to them in the spring, and we're going to be our word in returning back to them this fall.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Trustee Leclerc, I see your hand up, and then we'll go to Trustee Halberstadt. Trustee Leclerc, do you have a question?
Sorry, I've taken my hand down. I guess my mic's not working very well. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, I've taken my hand down for this.
Okay, no problem. Trustee Halberstadt.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to ask Superintendent Howitt, did you write out this survey? Did you compose it yourself? It's very dense. It's 25 pages, not double spaced. Or did you have assistance with this?
It was a collaborative effort. Worked with a graduate student. Worked with the CYF team and the Open Minds team in the development of the questionnaire, the lit review, and then the writing of the final report. So it was a collaborative effort. I can't claim to have done that all on my own. It's a team. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for those questions. Are there any further questions? I don't see any. Okay, then we'll move on to trustee question period. Are there any questions this evening? Trustee Leclerc.
Now I have my hand up, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, through you, September 30th was the second time we've celebrated not celebrated, but remembered Truth and Reconciliation. And I'm wondering if somebody from administration could comment on some of the activities that we saw throughout our board.
Madam Chair, may I?
Of course.
Okay. Thank you for the question, and a very important day across our nation. We're getting better at the work that we are doing. We started back in the spring by advertising the opportunity of purchasing T-shirts. And I don't know if trustees recall, but last year we did that. And we started our first fund, Greater Essex Fund, to honor First Nations, Métis, and Inuit students at graduation time. So last June, two first students to receive a scholarship from the board based on those proceeds. And so this year we started with that in the spring, and we had proceeds of almost $1,100 that we're adding to the pot this year. And then right at the beginning of September, we started with, I think I've described to people in the past, we do a sway. It's very comprehensive. It's a labor of love with all the different resources and opportunities. And I really feel like we're moving beyond the performative in terms of the engagement from our staff and students. We had well over 100 students, or well over 100 classes, participate in different community events. One was with Moses Ludlam. He's an Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Chippewa, Kettle and Stony Point artist, and he focused on the purpose of this day through art with students. We had over 200 classes also participate with Geronimo Henry, who is a survivor of residential schools. He was there from age 5 for, I think it was 9 years of his life, and he talked about the impact and intergenerational trauma of it. So people have been really engaged, and we also did a flag raising at the central board office, and all schools rose the flag, I should say, of Every Child Matters. So it's really becoming part of the fabric of what we do, but not just on that day. We provide information well before that day throughout the month of September, and to make it part of the integral learning that's happening. So thank you for the question and acknowledging that very important day.
Thank you very much. No supplementary.
Thank you. Are there any other questions this evening? I don't see any hands up. Just interrupt me if I'm missing you, but I do have a question. With the municipal elections just around the corner, what are we doing in our schools to kind of keep our students engaged and informed? Because it's very important that students are informed. That's how you become civically engaged. The younger you have this knowledge and this interest, the more you are engaged as adults. So what are we doing in our schools?
Madam Chair, through you, we offer Student Vote Ontario, and that went out the second week of school, and it's an experiential learning program where students get the chance to vote firsthand. They get free materials to the school. They actually cast ballots for municipal council members and trustees for their area, so it's a mock for them within the schools, which is awesome. And I received a message last week from Student Vote Ontario that said well over 30 of our schools had registered to engage and do the work, which showing the civic mindedness of students and staff within our district. And they said that we were part of the over 50% range of schools across the province, school districts across the province with high engagement. So that was really nice. So that's happening for sure in our schools.
Oh, that's great. That's great news. The more we can have people, knowledgeable what's going on, the more civically engaged adults we can have, and we need voices heard. So that's wonderful news. Trustee Cheen, I see your hand up.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's the same question as I asked before, and regarding the students, and especially after the report, we see that for certain grades, 20% their mathematics didn't really improve at all. So I'm wondering how can we put those kind of students to the next level, next grade, and if this happened again and again, and their learning capabilities gap is larger and larger. I don't think it's good for the kids to have self-esteem and to catch up with the knowledge, and it also put all these students, different level students together, and it's kind of will affect the other students to learn the knowledge. So I'm just wondering how the the board handle this, and is that possible to have a kind of requirement before going to the next grade, and if they really need a kind of makeup, certain kind of makeup, and can we just keep them at the current grade and until they catch up and go to the next level? Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair.
Yep.
I'll start that response if anybody else wants to join. I see your question and the purpose of it, but the retention of students is not a common practice in the district and across the province. And on the flip side, when you talk about self-esteem of students, keeping them back is not the answer. It's the intervention that is the answer. And so programs like Lexia that my colleagues have spoken about, programs like summer learning, is an intense intervention that can help students to make advancement in any one of the content areas such as literacy and numeracy. Holding them back for 1 or more years can have detrimental effects on their self-esteem. And it was a practice many years ago. And, the flip side of it is having a student that is a lot older with younger students, right? And so the key is understanding and knowing the student and providing that intervention. I do appreciate the question, but that's the rule of thumb that we follow.
Yeah, just Superintendent Hillman, do you have anything to say? Yeah.
Through you, Madam Chair. What I can add is that this has been identified, certainly in the last 20 years, as one of the single most studied educational ideas in history. Sometimes we're sorting through 60, 70, 80 studies to try to understand the research in this area, in the United States particularly, but in Canada and in Europe, there are thousands and tens of thousands of studies. So a couple of things are clear from the research. The research has looked at 3 variables: academic achievement of students who are retained versus students who are not retained, personal development, so ideas of how students feel, positivity, attitudes, self-esteem, ability to get along with others. That's the second. And then the third area is feelings of positivity towards school, that they value school and think school is something important and that they will continue. There is literally no evidence in the broader research that supports retaining students. Many studies don't find differences, but the overwhelming conclusion from research and meta-analysis is that students who are promoted instead of retained have higher academic achievement over time, that they have better personal adjustments and feelings of well-being, and that they have more positive attitudes towards school. And the second big idea is that learning is really different than there's like 50 things you have to learn, and if you don't learn them, you go back. If you're in a grade 3 class struggling with fractions, we're still teaching fractions in grade 4. So as Dr. Howitt said, it's about how do you intervene with those students. It doesn't mean there aren't any circumstances ever where this makes sense, but what we know to be true from overwhelming research is this does harm, and it doesn't get us what we want. The students don't do better when they're retained. And I think knowing what we know, it's important that we not engage in that activity again, unless there's specific circumstances outside of that would allow us to do that. When it comes to these discussions as a principal and a superintendent, we involve the family, and there's an awful lot of factors we would look at, but I don't see the value in a broader change in our, in our general stance.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions this evening? Seeing and hearing none, we can move on to notices of motion. Are there any notices of motion for the Education Committee? Seeing none, we can move on to announcements. Are there any announcements this evening?
I see a hand up for Trustee Cheen, and I'm not sure if that's a residual one.
Oh, it's down now.
Sorry, yeah.
No problem. So I had Trustee Hatfield first for an announcement.
Yeah, thank you. So before our meeting started tonight, I was at an elementary school for their Meet the Teacher evening. Beautiful weather they had, which was nice, and the event was held outside of the school. And the thing I just wanted to tell everybody about, because I just made it was make your heart feel glad kind of a thing. There was the kids were encouraged to formally introduce themselves, their parents, to the teachers. And if they would do that, then they got a ballot for a draw. Well, there were kids running around introducing their parents, and in some cases their grandparents, like me. But the longest lineup, the whole time I was there, the longest lineup was kids from all grades at this elementary school wanting to introduce their parents, and in some cases grandparents, to the music teacher. It was awesome to see that. And since I was standing in that line for a while, I was able to overhear some of the great discussion between parents and the teacher. And I've always been very supportive of arts programming, arts of all kinds, and I'm also one who would like to see STEM getting back to STEAM, and recognizing the importance of the arts. But that was just a real feel-good moment to see that lineup and all the excitement of the kids introducing the music teacher to their parents and grandparents. So I just wanted to share that as an announcement, because I just felt like I know I needed some feel-good stuff today. So there you have mine for today.
Thanks for sharing, Trustee Hatfield. That's awesome to hear.
Yeah.
Trustee Higgison.
Thank you very much, and thank you to Trustee Hatfield for that. That is wonderful to hear, not only about the arts and those students, but getting back to Meet the Teacher nights and doing them outside in our schools. I'm grateful to hear that, so thank you. October is LGBT History Month. It was created by a secondary school teacher named Rodney Wilson in 1994, and this designation is meant to highlight and celebrate the history and achievements of 2S LGBTQIA+ peoples. Since honoring diverse communities is a strategic priority of the GEDDSB, this month is an excellent time to reflect on the ways we each contribute to our welcoming, safe, and inclusive spaces for teaching and learning.
Thank you. Are there any other announcements for this evening? Trustee Burgess.
I think Trustee Sartori had her hand up before me.
Okay, Trustee Sartori, go for it.
Okay, thanks for that, Trustee Burgess. So I have a couple of announcements. October is Women's History Month, which is honored across Canada. This month commemorates the Persons Case, when on October 18th, 1929, women were ruled as persons in society and obtained the right to vote. So almost 100 years ago. There's no better way to honor the work of those that came before us than to exercise our right to vote whenever we can. So I'm just going to put in a plug to don't forget to use your right to vote on October 24th in the current municipal election. As well, October 11th is International Day of the Girl, which focuses on the need to address challenges girls face and promotes empowerment and fulfillment of the rights of girls. So a couple of really important, commemorations and I think, responsibilities that all trustees have as well in recognizing those things.
Thank you very much. Trustee Burgess.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Today, October the 4th, marks the National Day of Action for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls and 2S LGBTQIA people. And of course, there was a national action plan developed to drive transformative change to end systemic racism and violence against Indigenous women, Indigenous girls, and 2S LGBTQIA plus people, wherever they are. In my particular case, I would like to personally remember Diane Dobson, a local Indigenous woman from Saugeen First Nation who was brutally murdered, went missing, brutally murdered, and whose murder remains unsolved in the city of Windsor. And we remember the victims, we remember the missing, we hope for their return. And it's a solemn thing. We hope they're found, and we hope they find justice. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I see in the chat that Trustee Cook has an announcement.
I do. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just want to announce that October 10th is World Mental Health Day. The overall objective of this day is to raise awareness of mental health issues around the world and to mobilize efforts in the support of mental health. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other trustees with announcements? I do have a number, so I just want to give other people an opportunity. I see some remnant hands up there with Trustee Higgison and Trustee Sartori. Are those just remnants?
Sorry, that's a remnant.
Oh, no problem. Okay, so I'll start on my list. There are quite a few. October is a very heavy month for announcements and special days. October is Learning Disabilities Awareness Month. It is recognized to reduce the stigma surrounding learning disabilities in children and adults. It is a month to learn about the challenges that individuals with learning disabilities face and to consider how we all can offer support, understanding, and acceptance. October is also Autism Awareness Month. It provides an opportunity for Canadians to learn more about autism and about how we can support not only those with autism, but also their families and their caregivers. Islamic Heritage Month is observed in October and provides an opportunity to learn and honor the rich history of Islam and the contributions of Muslims in Canada. It is important to recognize the diversity that exists within the faith of Islam and the people who practice it, including the peoples, stories, and cultures that have shaped and continue to shape Canada. October is also Hispanic Heritage Month. This month is an opportunity for us to join together to recognize and celebrate the heritage, culture, achievement, and contributions of Latin American and Hispanic communities across Canada. Yom Kippur begins at sundown today, and it ends the evening of October the 5th. Yom Kippur is the holiest day in the year of Judaism and is also known as a Day of Atonement. World Teachers' Day is celebrated tomorrow on October the 5th. This year marks the 18th anniversary of this day, with celebrations taking place across the world. The theme for World Teachers' Day 2022 is "The transformation of education begins with teachers," and we all know that that's very true. Teachers work hard to inspire, guide, educate, and mentor every day. Dedicated teachers around the world strive for equitable, inclusive, quality education and promote lifelong learning for all. As Malala wrote, "One child, one teacher, one book, one pen can change the world," and it truly can. Thank you to all teachers for the amazing work that you do every single day to make the world a better place. And finally, I would like to extend a huge congratulations to GEDSB educator Butch Rickard, as he was awarded the Prime Minister's Award for Excellence yesterday in Ottawa, for teaching excellence in Ottawa. So I'd like to extend a huge congratulations to Butch. That's quite an honor. And I know Butch personally. He's been a colleague of my husband's for many years, and I can say that he has unparalleled dedication to his students, and he makes their world a better place every day that he enters the classroom. Are there any further announcements tonight? If not, I would like to say that tonight marks the last education meeting with this current board, as we are facing municipal elections on October the 24th. I would like to thank my colleagues for entrusting me with this role of chair over the past 2 years. It has truly been an honor. The past 2 years have been very challenging years for myself and my family. And I'm so grateful for the compassion and the accommodation that all of you have shown me, including the ability to be on teams, because that's the only way that I could fulfill this role. And it's a role that I take very seriously. I would like to extend particular thankful and gratefulness to Trustee Burgess, Trustee Higginson, Dr. Howitt, and Ms. Pavea. Thank you for being here and taking my place when it was impossible for me to do so. So thank you very, very much. And with that, I will adjourn this meeting at 8:54 p.m. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Trustee Olmsted. I think that cues for me to start the Operations and Finance Committee meeting. So I will call that to order at 8:54 p.m. And I'll note that the attendance is the same as the previous meeting, and I'll go to approval of agenda. Can I get a mover for the approval of the agenda? Trustee Cook, and then seconded by Trustee Sartori. Any discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, that carries. I do want to make a note. I can't see everybody on the screen. I'm not using the actual Teams app, so it doesn't allow me to see everybody. So if your camera is on, I would still ask that you would either note it in the chat or use the raised hand function, because I can see that, but I can't see everybody's on screen here. So, okay, moving on to declaration of conflict of interest. Are there any conflicts of interest for the Ops and Finance Committee meeting? Seeing none, I will go to approval of minutes. I will ask for someone to move item E1 and E2 together.
I'll move. It's Trustee Hatfield.
Okay, Trustee Hatfield to move, and I see seconded by Trustee Sartori in the chat. Any discussions on the minutes? Okay, seeing none. Any opposition? Okay, seeing none, that carries. Any business arising from the minutes? Okay, seeing no business arising from the minutes, we will go to presentations. So this evening, we have item G1, which is the ventilation overview and update. Trustees would have received a copy in advance of the meeting, but tonight we have Vince Laframboise, who is our building systems officer, here to present it to us. And I should note, this was also in response to a question from Trustee Sartori in a previous meeting as well. So thank you to our to Superintendent Armstrong and her team for getting this together so quickly in order to kind of answer those questions and for transparency's sake. So I will pass it off to Vince if he is here and can share his screen. Okay, perfect. Take it away.
Hi, good evening, everybody. This is to provide a brief overview of the board's ventilation systems and operations and to provide an update to the Board of Trustees on actions taken to date. Just a bit of an overview on what forced air ventilation systems do. Forced air ventilation systems are used to force air into space through filters, a heating element, and potentially a cooling element. This fan would draw air from the outside and from the space at a certain ratio, depending on the position of the dampers, that control the amount of each type of air that enters or re-enters the space. The dampers move to maintain a certain temperature in the mixing chamber so that the required amount of outdoor air enters this chamber, but it is not cold enough to freeze any heating elements, which is a big concern. The outdoor air, as air is forced into the room, it is pushed out of the room in the form of return air. A certain amount of it must be exhausted as it is replaced with outdoor air, and the volume of air coming into the room must be roughly the same at all times. Passive ventilation systems essentially work where there's an exhaust fan that pulls air out of the spaces. This fan draws air through windows and walls and actually through, when we talk about through walls, it's actually a measurable amount called infiltration. And certainly was relied upon in a number of older schools as how kind of would get through the wall assembly. In most of these buildings, heating is usually provided by a radiator, and there's no control of the amount of outside air. In this case, a passive vent is supplied in the wallware in our schools. The designers relied on infiltration through the windows or leakage through the walls. An overview of why outdoor air is important is that outdoor air exchanges the air by introducing outdoor air and getting rid or exhausting the room air. One of the main purposes of this is to get rid of the CO2, which is actually a byproduct of occupants in the space. It also reduces smell and may improve mental awareness. In reviewing our ventilation systems, it was determined that 7 schools and 16 additions had passive ventilation systems that relied on an exhaust fan and radiators along the wall under the windows. All of the schools in our system have a type of forced air system, including unit ventilators, energy recovery or heat recovery ventilators, constant air volume or variable air volume air handlers, and rooftop packaged equipment. At the start of COVID and into October of 2020, there was obviously an identified need of response from the government. So the federal and provincial governments had provided about $656 million to school boards in the province. And we had submitted sorry, my camera was just resetting. We had submitted for 118 projects across the eligible categories. And we received approval of all 118 projects to the sum of approximately $15.7 million. So our projects included new ventilations in schools that did not have forced ventilation, cooling centers, water bottle fill stations, new Wi-Fi access points, magnetic door hold open devices, upgrades to childcare spaces to include exterior access and internal washrooms, as well as some equipment renewals. Certainly this opportunity granted us really a rare opportunity to improve ventilation infrastructure in a number of our schools that we just couldn't have done with some of the existing funding. This really is generational funding that is rarely seen. 14 of our schools were eligible for this funding to add new forced air ventilation systems. Our traditional approach to adding ventilations in schools has been fairly consistent over the last 30 years. Since the work at Dougal Public School, we've been looking at central air handlers with VAVs throughout our schools. For renovations, we would typically replace like for like, just as an ease of the system. And several of our older schools with ventilation also had unit ventilators located within each classroom. For our existing 14 schools that were identified for new ventilation, they all had the same heating system, which is a perimeter heating system and exhaust fans, which encouraged outdoor air to enter through open windows or passive wall infiltration. Our traditional approach would have been, and really the simplest approach would have been to add a unit ventilator to each classroom. We wanted to think outside the box a bit when designing this new ventilation, and we had kind of organized or highlighted some goals. So they were to provide forced air ventilation throughout spaces that had passive ventilation, to limit the maintenance impact by minimizing new equipment. For example, one air handling unit could do maybe up to 10 classrooms, depending on which way we went. We wanted to support maintenance by utilizing equipment that they would be familiar with and really leveraging the existing skill set to maintain our existing equipment. We wanted to ensure the components would be procured in less than 10 months due to supply chain issues. We had a small window once we got approval of the projects to actually get them finished. And so that was also a consideration, is how quickly we could get the equipment. And the other thing was to minimize the impact of the board's work on greenhouse gas emissions. So when we compare what we would typically have done and what would have been the simple answer, which is providing unit ventilators, we had some pros and cons to the unit ventilator approach. One of them would have been is we would have had to replace 14 boiler plants across those schools, which would have been an enormous cost to increase that infrastructure. There would have been significant increases in greenhouse gas emissions from the work and ongoing operations of the systems. Also increased maintenance just due to the number of units that would have been installed. The equipment was also not readily available within the 10-month limit, and we really had no opportunity to use conditioned air during hotter months. Just want to take this moment to just kind of really highlight what ventilation is. Ventilation air really is the amount of outside air that we're bringing in. So we can have mechanical ventilation, and as this interpretation of one of the ASHRAE standards reads, this implies that there can be mechanical ventilation that is not ventilation. And I know that sounds a little bit interesting or maybe even a little odd. And really the concept is we can bring in outside mechanical ventilation air, and we can also have recirculated air. We really did want to focus on outside ventilation air as part of this project, and there's a number of reasons for that, which I'll go through here shortly. So what we wanted to look at in terms of a new ventilation system was looking towards ERVs. So a number of the highlights that it hit for us is it reduced greenhouse gases when compared to other systems. We are looking to improve comfort as we are able to now introduce conditioned air. We were able to reduce the total amount of equipment, which both reduced the initial cost, the installation cost, the time for installation, as well as the ongoing maintenance. Using energy efficient equipment, which are the energy recovery ventilators, we were able to accomplish the installation in less than 10 months. One of the really neat things is we didn't have to disturb the existing school heating system, so we were able to allow them to continue to operate without having to have any disruptions to them. So as part of the CVRAS projects and the schools that receive new ventilation, we had 14 schools, and they are listed there, that received this new ventilation equipment. Pretty significant projects through the schools. There was some schools with electrical updates, some schools with structural reinforcing. But overall, it was a really fantastic project. Our contractors worked exceptionally hard to accomplish it in a really short timeline. So overall, what you see on the screen now is what the majority of this equipment looks like. This is from the roof at Northwood. And what you have on the left-hand side is the system air energy recovery unit. So that's got the two supply fans, so the fan that brings in outside air, and then the exhaust fan that extracts the exhaust air, the return air from the building. And it does it through an energy recovery wheel, so we're capturing the energy. And when I talk energy recovery wheel, there's a couple of different types of wheels. There's some that would only recover heat. Our energy recovery wheels do both heat and humidity. What you see and then transitioning over to the other unit, that's where the cooling and heating coil is. So that's a direct coil off the air source heat pump. And so that gave us the ability to condition the air. So both for heating and for cooling. And this is how we were able to utilize our electrical grid and to provide in one piece of equipment, both the conditioning of the air, so the heating, and the cooling of the air, so the heating in the winter months, and then not cooling necessarily in the summer months. But what we were really trying to do is just to remove moisture. So it's working more as a dehumidification coil to knock that moisture content out of the air. The way energy recovery wheels work is really to capture the energy that we've already put into the space. And that's usually the easiest way to explain them is the effort or the utilities that we've used to heat or condition the air. We want to capture them again, which helps us to precondition the air, as well as reduces energy costs overall. Really what it does is it provides for a much more comfortable environment. The other neat thing that it does, that it does it on the opposite side as well, is there are outdoor conditions that we don't always want. So as we're able to capture our indoor conditions that we want, we're also able to not allow those outdoor conditions into our space, which is helpful for utility costs and for comfort. So for our systems, essentially this is what they're doing is if you start on the left-hand side of the screen, the outdoor air enters the unit ventilator or the energy recovery unit, and it goes through the wheel. So the outdoor air stream actually continues along the bottom of this picture inside the unit, but the energy is actually rejected back to the exhaust air stream. And then we've got our return air stream, which is coming in the top of the unit on the right, which has already been conditioned. And we're able to capture the energy, which is both the humidity and the temperature, and then push it back to the outdoor air stream, which essentially preconditions the outside air. And then we're allowed to hit that air source heat pump coil, which allows us to condition the air with both from a heating perspective and a dehumidification perspective. So on top of just the CVRAS projects, we're always improving our mechanical systems. So other new work that was in addition to the CVRAS projects between 2020 and 2022 was an ERV in a very similar setup at Mount Carmel for 2 classrooms, units for the Anderton Gym and the Colchester North Gym, a rooftop unit for the Hetherington office, as well as the Massey gyms and the Walkerville gym. Overall, when we look at utility impact of this system, we were able to calculate for 13 schools, and we added Massey and Mount Carmel in there as well. If you go looking, the one school that's not listed here that we did add ventilation to is MD Benny. But because these were all similar units, it was a pretty simple, once we did one cost analysis of one unit, we were able to extrapolate it out to all of them. Overall, with the addition of 48 units, we're looking at a total increase of kilowatt hours to our utility of about 0.46%. What's really interesting about this and supporting our efforts for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, this is all electrical power. So currently the electrical grid in Ontario is running about 97% greenhouse gas emission free. So when you factor that the majority of this energy consumption that we've added is all electrical, and the source of that is essentially greenhouse gas emission free, this has been an exceptionally clean solution, both for improving the air quality within our schools, but also with doing it the right way and with technologies that we have available to us that really are proving themselves. The further impacts, so we all did this because this was incredibly important for ventilation, but we wanted to remember, and we talked about it before, is that indoor air quality in the comfort feeling is also important. So the ability to condition the air. So using an air source heat pump to both do the heating and the cooling. And I say cooling, it's because it's really a piece of cooling equipment, but really it's to knock the moisture out of the air. We've really improved the comfort in our schools. And I think that's really a pretty amazing outcome from this project is we not only added ventilation to these schools and to these spaces, but we're also able to improve comfort. And as we all know, in with the effects of climate change, this is a challenging topic. To be able to do ventilation as well as improving comfort, I think is really a win-win across the board. Just to give a brief snapshot, it's tough to do total comparisons, but certainly at Northwood we were able to do a comparison. So there have been, I think to my mind, 6 or 7 editions at Northwood over the years. But this one in particular, we've got 2 sections of the school on the right-hand side there were 2 separate editions that just extended off of each other, and they were done with energy recovery units with gas heating, and no way to condition the air in the summer. And then on the left-hand side, we had added ERVs 7 and 8, and those are the newer ERVs. We're able to do some conditioning with the air source heat pumps. And overall, we're seeing a really nice performance on the side with the air source heat pumps. The temperatures vary a little bit, and because we've got and still supporting the idea of opening windows, and I would totally imagine in this case that we've got some open windows, but overall really improving the comfort in the building and removing the moisture content. And as a comparison to another school, which is Anderton Public, where we've got a number of unit ventilators on the east side of the school, and then the new ERVs on the west side of the school, and they're highlighted here. We're averaging about a 5-degree reduction in temperature. There's also a reduction in humidity, which isn't measured here. And that was really our goal for this, was to improve the comfort level in the schools. And for this one, it's just another example of some of the work that we did. So while we have an ongoing project at Commerce Centennial right now with windows and the boiler plant, we also did a fair amount of work there last year, which was the addition of 3 ERVs for ventilation in the older part of the school, as well as some equipment replacement on the existing part in form of a multi-zone unit and a gas-fired unit for the gym. And that is the end of my presentation.
Thank you so much, Mr. Laframboise. Is there any questions from trustees about this presentation? Sure, go ahead, Trustee Burgess. I see your hand there.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. I really appreciated it. It brought me back to like my thermodynamics prof. Enthalpy, woo, exciting. Anyway, I had a question about the MERV rating for the filters. I know that we made a commitment to a higher rating, and I know that the support from the province and from the federal funding is somewhat intact and not intact in others. And I'm wondering if we're going to keep the higher MERV rating for our filters that we're using for the rest, certainly for the rest of this year. I'd like to see it as a new standard. That's my first question.
Sorry, just bear with me for a minute. Just having an issue with my my computer here. Can you guys still hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Yep.
I think overall, I think the approach with the MERV 13 filters was a really good approach. I think given some more time, we're going to pick the best systems that need MERV 13. Should that be the decision to move forward? Not all of the systems need MERV 13, and certainly when I look at our equipment that we have here, you know, there's actually two sets of filters in these ERVs. There's a set on the incoming air. There's also a set of filters on the leaving air, and that's to protect the wheel. So there's a number of different approaches to filtration. Some of it is to protect the equipment, and some of it's to filter out particulate in the airstream. And really, there's no one size fits all answer to that question, because the utilization of them across the system is going to be different depending on the equipment and the application of the equipment.
For sure. I have a supplemental if no one else has any.
Go ahead, Trustee Burgess. I didn't see anyone else.
Very quickly then, there are some schools in our system that are scheduled for closure, and they're not eligible for any upgrades in mechanical ventilation, and most of them do have passive, and they are amongst the worst condition, hence scheduled for closure. And I'm wondering what we can do for those, particularly dehumidification in really hot weather, and making sure that we move our HEPA units, you know, specifically to those schools that don't have this kind of relief or can't get it in the next, you know, couple of years or whenever it is until they close.
Hi, everyone. It's Juliana Hinchliff. Sorry if I butt in right now through you, Madam Chair. I'm going to just make a couple of points. To the point about the MERV 13, we are committed to using MERV 13 across the system and any air handler that can handle it until the end of this year or until told otherwise. So I just wanted to make that point. The second point about the existing schools, that we were unable to use the funding. There was very strict criteria from the Ministry of Education on where we could use SIVRIS money and where we could use any money. And schools slated for closure in the next 5 years, unfortunately, did not fall in that category. However, we have deployed many high-efficiency particulate air filters across all these schools, in every school, through all the schools that are slated for closure and do not have HEPA or do not have active ventilation. Luckily, with the closure of General Amherst, we were able to now reduce that to just the ones in the Kingsville area and DM Eagle. All the other schools now have ventilation, so they have multiple HEPA units in every room now. Wherever the ministry recently, just before the end of the year, provided a lot of extra HEPA units, and we deployed them specifically in those schools.
Supplemental about the dehumidification in the summer, because on second floor of Kingsville High, for example, second floor of KPS, it's really hot. And taking out the moisture out of the air without a mechanical system, and HEPA doesn't really do that. I mean, you know. So I wonder if there's anything that we can do for the, you know, April, May, June, September timeline.
Yeah, it's a struggle. I have to admit that that's definitely a struggle. One of the things that we try to do, dehumidification, unfortunately, even in a portable system, is very difficult to maintain because as it removes water from the air, it has to be emptied. And that tends to, if it's not done on a regular basis, tends to flood rooms. So one of the things that we try to do is work with schools for using their cooling centers, for providing portable fans, and trying to do as best we can with what we have to try to mitigate some of the issues. And I totally agree. It is not comfortable in some of those days. I absolutely agree. So we're always here to support the schools and provide them, you know, whatever we can within our limits.
Thanks so much for that response. Are there any other questions from trustees tonight? Reminder, oh, Trustee Halberstadt, would you have a question?
See me.
I can't, no. Go ahead.
Yeah, my question is, who are we, I know you've gone over a number of schools, and the treatments at each. What school, how many schools have been missed, say, across the system with this kind of an upgrade?
Well, I can answer that one.
Yeah.
So through you, Madam Chair, the only schools that have been missed are the ones that are closing in the next 5 years.
Okay, and the ones that are closing are going to still get air conditioning, is that correct? That's going to be the strategy for the policy, or not?
Not for schools that are closing, sorry. So with the schools in Kingsville in particular, the new Kingsville JK to 12 is opening in 2024. Fingers crossed, everyone. And it will have a fully air-conditioned school, and that's the closest we're going to get to air conditioning for those schools at this point.
So other schools that are other new schools are not going to have air conditioning?
All new schools have had air conditioning since Dougal Public School 30 years ago. That's been a standard of our board for the past 30 years.
That's going to continue?
Oh, yes. I think climate change has kind of set that in stone.
Yeah. Okay, now, as a trustee, I know in past years, I get flooded with phone calls in the heat of the summer. And I received none this year. I think it's probably the same experience for other trustees. Could you identify that as something that you're understanding, that people, the teachers, students, etc., are not suffering as much because of these new ventilation systems?
Yes, I think that is absolutely the case. I think, and I'll give full credit to Mr. Laframboise here. This was his brilliant strategy, and it's something that I think as we move forward, when we have to replace unit ventilators, for example, I think this is something that we will probably carry forward in other circumstances. I don't think we're going to go back to replace like for like. I think this has proven that we can provide conditioned air, provide a more comfortable environment with less cost, and that's what we're here for. So I think it's something, it's really outside the box thinking. It's kind of unique. I don't think any other school board's gone this way so far. And so it's something that I think we should probably share with other school boards as well. But yes, it's the strategy we're going to definitely use moving forward.
Okay, well, congratulations to you and Vince especially for coming up with this remedy.
Thank you, and thank you, Ms. Hinchcliffe, for putting a finer point on that, and how innovative the strategy has been, and how successful it's been across our board as well. So thank you, and thank you for the presentation tonight, Mr. Laframboise. And I don't think there are any more questions, so so thank you so much for your time. Okay, so with that, I will continue on our agenda to item G2, which is the 2021-2022 year-end update. And Mr. Mayhew will be giving this presentation for the trustees tonight. I think that he is here. Okay, great.
I am here. Can you hear me and can you see the presentation?
Yes, yes, we can. Well, I can, so yes.
Great, perfect. Good evening, everyone. The goal of this oral presentation will be to provide you with a year-end progress update. And before I even get started, I'll draw your attention to item K3 in the agenda. There's a report on the interim financial expenses as at May 31st, 2022. And of course, that's provided pretty late to you because we don't meet in the summer. So that's not a report we can finalize before the end of June. So when we provide you that quarterly report, by the time we get to this meeting, it's already year end and it's a little outdated. So the intention, I guess, of this meeting or this oral update is to provide you with more relevant year-end information. So I'll review the timelines, the current status, where we're at in that timeline phase, a review of our financial expectations compared to revised budget, and a review of the preliminary revenue and expense results. So with respect to timelines, our external auditors, KPMG, are scheduled for on-site fieldwork for the 2-week period, October 24th to November 4th. The audit committee meeting is tentatively scheduled for November 14th. That's subject to any changes. And the audit committee's role is to review the financial statements, audit findings report, and management reports and recommend those items for approval to the board. And then ministry EFIS submission date, and those are the ministry forms that we have to submit. They're a different format than our financial statements. That submission date is November 15th, 2022. And then we are to send along our approved financial statements to the ministry by December 6th. So what's the status? The accounting department right now is working diligently to finalize year-end adjustments, adjusting journal entries. For example, there's lots of capital adjustments we have to consider. There's future liability adjustments that we have to consider in light of our actuarial report that is pending. There's revenue adjustments and deferrals that need to be addressed, some other accruals, and some account reclassifications. We have to prepare working papers and supporting documentation for the auditors. We're finalizing that now. And then we have to prepare our financial statements, associated notes to the financial statements, and perform detailed analysis and draft memos to the audit committee. Consistent with prior year timelines, at this stage, there's still many final adjusting journal entries to be considered, which will have a significant impact on the final financial position of the board as at August 31st, 2022. Therefore, it's difficult to give a concrete net surplus or deficit at this time. However, management is able to provide some commentary on expectations based on preliminary analysis and recent monthly reports. And just to give you an example of that, I know we've talked about this in the past. We're still awaiting our actuarial report, which revalues our employee future benefits. So it looks at our liabilities for retirement benefits and retirement gratuities and discounts that liability to its present value. What that essentially means is the changes in that liability will have an impact on the gain or loss that we incur in our financial statements. If the discount rate changes, the liability changes. So as of right now, we're aware that the assumption is that the interest rate or the discount rate will increase this year, which actually will have a positive impact. It will reduce the liability. So we expect a gain on as a result of this actuarial valuation, but we're just awaiting those final results. So with respect to the revised budget, as I mentioned, the quarterly report as of May is provided in your package, and we'll be happy to answer any questions with respect to that report when we get to that section. In that report, the report explains the detailed changes from the original budget that was approved in June of 2021 compared to the revised budget that was submitted to the ministry in December of 2021. The revised budget is management's best estimate at that time as to the final financial results of the board for the 21-22 school year or fiscal year. And as a quick recap, the revised budget includes a provision to incur a deficit or the use of our accumulated surplus up to 2% of the board's operating allocation, or $8.4 million. Unlike the 2021 year, GSN stabilization funding was not provided, and the board had to use their accumulated surplus to provide for financial relief in excess of COVID supports. For example, lower enrollments, incremental COVID expenses for ventilation, cleaning, PPE, etc. So let me talk about some of the expectations with respect to revenue for the year end. So as you know, the primary driver of the funding formula, or the GSN, Grants for Student Needs, is enrollment. Average daily enrollment for the 21-22 school year is calculated by adding actual October 31st enrollment to actual March 31st enrollment and dividing the total by 2. At the time the revised estimates were submitted in December, only October 31st enrollment was known. The actual final enrollment, inclusive of March 2022, has been reported and signed off in ONSIS and loaded into the ministry reports. And there's approximately a 30 student difference lower than what was reported in the revised budget. Therefore, there will be minimal impact on revenue as a result of enrollment, and revenue estimates are expected to approximate the budget. We're working to finalize revenues from non-enrollment driven sources, such as priority and partnership fund revenues, energy solar rebates, donations, and other non-ministry sources. But for the most part, we would expect our revenues to be consistent with our expectations so far in our reporting to you. With respect to expenses, based on the previous reporting and preliminary analysis, I can offer some areas where we have additional costs and cost savings compared to our expectations. For example, occasional teachers. Occasional teacher costs are significantly higher than budgeted. Based on preliminary calculations, it's expected that actual expenses will exceed the revised estimates by approximately $4 million, which is very significant. In the teacher assistants, professionals, and educational support staff line, we're tracking a little bit below budget by approximately $1 million as a result of part-time school aid savings and other budgeted savings in wages. That helps to offset that increase in the occasional line. With respect to textbooks, classroom supplies, as of July, we were tracking about $2 million under budget. Approximately $1 million of this is director's contingency we still have available, which will help offset the increased cost for occasional supply costs, for instance. Also, there are savings due to COVID restrictions, extracurricular activities, and programming which were not permitted under the health guidelines. Therefore, certain budgets will not fully be utilized in this area. A significant amount of purchasing was done in August in anticipation of a normal startup, and the accounting department is still recording and reconciling activity in this line and making sure it falls into the right period. While we expect to still have some savings, it's anticipated that the increased purchasing activity in August will reduce the savings previously noted. With respect to non-classroom expenses, we expect our budget to approximate actual expenses. No significant changes we're seeing there, and nothing to report at this time. However, I will mention again the impact of employee future benefits. The liability for retirement benefits and retirement gratuities are subject to third-party actuarial evaluation. And as I mentioned, there could be a significant adjustment that will help us in that area. So, conclusion. You're really wondering probably at this time, what does this mean in terms of the bottom line? Is the board going to be incurring a deficit? And if so, how much? Will we need the full 2% as we included in our revised budget? Or will we require less? Or even better, will we require none of it? It's tough to say for certain, but based on the information that we know at this time, it's unlikely that the full 2% deficit will be required, as savings have helped to offset the pressures in those other areas. So a more realistic expectation is that the board will only need to use up to 1% or 4.2 million of its accumulated surplus, which will be reflected as a deficit for the current year's operations. And if anyone has any questions at this time, we'll be happy to try and answer those.
Thanks so much. So I look to my colleagues to see if there are any questions from the trustees. Sure, go ahead, Trustee Sartori.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that report. And please, Madam Chair, if this question is misplaced and you want me to wait until trustee question period, I can do that as well. And I'm not quite sure if it fits in. So I had a question that was related to school fundraising. And I know, so we've talked about the impacts of COVID on, various aspects of our school community a couple of times tonight, including at the education committee and lots here already as well. So I'm wondering, and you might not have these figures off the top of your head, and I get that, but I'm wondering about the impacts of COVID on school fundraising. And I guess my question is sort of two-pronged. So one of them being, if you can help maybe trustees understand a little bit more how the fundraising, supports, I guess, those extras in schools and things that the school community values that might not be specifically funded. And then, because I would think that they would be impacted by COVID, right? Because, I know different kinds of fundraising activities can happen, such as bingos and other things too that certainly couldn't happen during COVID. So I'm wondering if you can answer that aspect of it, and then if you can, if possible at all, if you have ballpark figures on how that may have changed as a result of COVID. Madam Chair, is that a fair question for this question?
I was going to say I would defer to Mr. Mayhew if he thinks he can. If not, we can punt it to the trustee question period.
No, I think it's a fair question because it is relevant to the financial statements and the update that we've provided. So I can go ahead and start, and then Superintendent Armstrong can jump in and provide any context I've missed. I can start off with some figures. As you would expect, fundraising has been affected significantly by COVID restrictions. And I'll go back to even before COVID. If you look at our overall fundraising revenues that were received at all schools in a non-COVID year, let's go back to 2017-18, 2018-19. We are right around 9.6 million, 9.2 million in total fundraising revenues collected through the schools. And of course, we'd have very similar expense levels because a lot of that fundraising is for specific field trips, student activities, resources, external fundraising, and that money flows right back out in the year it's received. In 2019-20, fundraising revenues dropped to $6 million. And we know what happened in that year in March. In the following year, the 2021 year, the most, I think, restricted school year with the longest amount of closure periods and shutdowns and restrictions, we went down to $1.5 million in fundraising. So, and in the year that I just spoke to, we just finalized that, and I can say that we're about back up to $3.9 million in fundraising. So it's gone back up since really the March 2020 period. Entering into this year, we would expect that revenue to creep back up, to go back up. We're expecting a normal year. It looks like fundraising events, activities are moving ahead. There's no restrictions that I'm aware of. School administration principals are in the process right now of finalizing their annual fundraising plans to identify all their different areas of fundraising at the school level and what their plans are to spend that money. And as part of that process, we would also look at their balances that exist in their accounts now, and try and have a plan to spend those as well if there's any carry forward amounts. So moving into this year, we'd expect hopefully to be back up at a pre-COVID level, assuming that there remains to be no more restrictions.
Sure, go ahead.
Supplemental, and I just want to say that, oh my gosh, has it ever been impacted? Yeah. So I'm obviously concerned as a trustee. Are there like different kinds of activities that I'm not sure where to go almost with this, like ways that we can support different school communities to, I don't know. I actually don't know where to go next with the question. I might ask, I might bring a motion later to ask for some more detailed information. So I guess, is there any comment you can make on that question around supports for school communities?
I can start to try to answer this. Sean,
Okay.
You can chime in. Thank you. So you, Madam Chair. I think it's tricky because our funding is prescribed by the GSN, and so much of it is enveloped, or it's marked for certain areas, with, quite frankly, salaries and benefits being 80% of our expenses for the board. So it doesn't always leave a lot of discretion in terms of allocating a budget, any additional budget out to schools. We try to provide some items they all have a small budget for individual schools. We try and provide some minor capital budgets so that they can make some minor capital improvements. Even our capital funding from the ministry, in terms of what qualifies as renewal funding versus school condition improvement funding, is very dictated in terms of how it's spent. So unfortunately, fundraising is a necessary requirement for schools that want some of the added things that we just simply can't provide, whether it's an outdoor classroom, or it's bleachers, or it's additional technology equipment maybe that they want, that's over and above what we're really able to provide. So it is challenging, but we are somewhat limited in that regard.
Okay. Can I ask one more supplemental, or you can
Sure, go ahead.
How easy is it to I guess go back and get an understanding of I guess many years before COVID, to understand, because my thinking too is that different schools probably have different, I guess, fundraising levels or abilities, right, relative to even the number of kids that go there, right? So relative to maybe median income in the school, something like that. So I'd really like to get a sense of those types of patterns, right, as a trustee. I'm not sure how easy that is, but that's the request that I'm leaning toward asking for.
I might just quickly, Sean, I completely understand where you're going with this. So I'll let Sean speak. I'll ask Sean to speak about how much we're able to go back and get that data. And we do acknowledge that there are challenges sometimes in
with certain schools maybe not being able to fundraise as effectively as other schools. And we've certainly tried to make some of those, we've addressed that to some extent through school budgets. And we've actually revised that formula to try and take a look at issues in terms of if it's a lower economic, socioeconomic population. We've worked with Prosperous United Way to get some data to kind of help inform that. So that helps with the school budget piece of it, doesn't address the fundraising. So maybe Sean, if you could add on, that would be great.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. We have a lot of historical data on this. On an annual basis, we prepare lots of analysis on school fundraising. We break it down into the different categories. We break it down into field trips, student activities, third-party fundraisers, any type of food-related fundraising events. I can honestly say what's driving the decrease in those years is just there wasn't a lot of student activities happening. A lot of that money that we collect is in and out for various events, various field trips, student activities that just were restricted and they couldn't happen. So those items there wasn't any fundraising done for those particular items. We did just recently form a school budget review committee that was comprised of some of us in the accounting team and a handful of principals. And we looked at the way in which we allocate instructional supplies budgets. And that's GSN money that gets allocated to each school. And that's specific for instructional supplies at each school level. We looked at that and we looked at it from an equity lens. We blew up the formula and we looked at which schools are having to, for instance, spend some of their instructional supplies budgets on basic needs of students and where is there more need. So we're in phase 1 of 2 of that implementation right now, which redistributes the formula and the money more equitable across the system to meet those student needs. So that's one initiative that we've been working on. And what that does is that helps to contribute perhaps to schools that don't have the same capacity to fundraise as others.
Thank you very much. I know I threw a little bit of a curveball and I really appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, thank you for those responses. And I noticed that there's Trustee Cheen and then Trustee Burgess in the queue. So go ahead, Trustee Cheen.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. My question is regarding the mental health budget. And when I go on canvassing and kind of many people, pay attention to the mental health issues and see that it should have the priority to solve it. And I see the report on page 24. There is the budget, and I want more detailed information about the mental health support budget. And also on page, let me see, appendix 2, page 38, and I see the revised budget for well-being and mental health bundle is 52,000, but the actual expense is only 7,000. So we just use 13% of the budget. So normally, because of the limitation of the funding, we cannot do a lot. But I'm curious why this funding is not sufficiently used, and is there any particular reason for that? And what's our plan regarding the mental health issue? Thank you.
I can try and start speaking to this a little bit, and I'm pretty certain that Superintendent Korbach can speak to it as well. The page you're referencing on page 24 relates to 2021-22 school year. So the last school year where we received COVID supports for mental health, supporting student mental health. That's over and above other funding that we would get for mental health initiatives. And that total amount that we received was $379,000. At the original budget, we could only budget for 1/2 of those revenues based on the ministry's directive. At the revised budget, we budgeted the full amount. All that funding was spent. I think the report that you're referencing to is at May 31st, and a lot of times there's timing related items that necessarily don't get captured in this report. But certainly it's been spent, and I'm sure that Superintendent Korbach would be able to provide some additional information about that.
Thanks, Superintendent Armstrong, and through you, Madam Chair. Yes, I can confirm that the mental health bundle, which is the amount you referenced at $52,000, has been spent. And as Superintendent Armstrong said, those numbers are as of May 31st, 2022, and those reports are reconciled and sent off generally by August 30th of the end of the so in this case, August 30th or 31st, 2022. So that money was used for a number of different things, classroom resources, training for staff. So we had a number of staff that took the Mindful Schools course, which is a course that helps them facilitate social emotional learning and social emotional regulation in the classroom, as well as incorporating mental health and well-being strategies into their daily instruction. So we spent a bit of it there. We bought resources to support our new special assignment teacher for student well-being out of that money, as well as providing some training for staff throughout the year. So yes, we did use that. And then the larger amount, although a portion of that went for staff mental health, the bulk of it was for student mental health. And we used that to hire additional social workers for semester 2. We also used that to create the special assignment teacher for student well-being position. It was also used to add 2 additional re-engagement attendance counselors for the duration of last school year, given our concerns about the number of students who may have disengaged during our COVID period and back and forth between virtual and in-person learning. So we provided some additional supports using that funding for re-engagement of students. So there are other things that was also used for some resources as well as some training, but the bulk of that went to providing additional staffing supports for student mental health during last school year.
Thank you so much. I will continue on to Trustee Burgess.
Thanks, Madam Chair. It's an additional question. I will ask it now rather than a trustee question period because it has already been discussed, and it's going to dovetail on the fundraising. At a recent OPSPA meeting, we were brought up to snuff with the Auditor General, the Office of the Auditor General of Ontario's Value for Money Review, the financial reporting of school boards in Ontario, which was released last December 2021. And it talked about some really very publicly, it's a public report about some recommendations, etc., about our collective insurance exchange. But there was another comment about how the Auditor General was considering a deeper look in some sort of, extra parameters around fundraising reporting in schools. And I'm wondering if you had heard any whisper of that. I need to kind of get a bit more clarity about what the actual comment was, but it did come from the finance person at OPSPA staff, and it was particularly about the Auditor General's report and fundraising in schools and how that might affect our bottom line.
Through you, Madam Chair, Superintendent Armstrong. Actually, I have the Auditor's General report in front of me, but there's quite a few recommendations, so I can't give you the exact wording of it. The gist of what I understand, and this has not ever been applied to our board, is that some boards are receiving qualifications on their audit opinion from their external auditors because auditors are not able to appropriately test for the completeness of revenue. And that would be one of several tests that auditors would do. And particularly with fundraising, sometimes it's cash. And it's difficult to always know whether what a school is reporting is complete. And that's always been a challenge. So for some school boards, the value of that fundraising may be significant relative to their financial statements and is resulting in a qualified opinion. We've never had that with our board. We do a lot of our fundraising goes through School Cash Online, which is helpful because a lot of payment is going by through credit card. That helps at least provide a record, and it's reconciled back to School Cash Online. But our auditors have never raised it as an issue in terms of purposes of qualifying financial statements. I think the Auditor General wants to resolve the issue completely for school boards. And I can certainly, I have the report here, but I don't have the particular finding directly at my fingertips. I'm certainly happy to follow up with you afterwards and just to explain what that is. But that's generally what the gist of that is, and trying to address that issue of the qualification because the auditors can't test completeness.
Supplemental, I did see that, and I couldn't actually see the word school fundraising and the, the recommendation sort of thing. I could see the exactly what you're talking about, the dilemma that they have. But I was just wondering if you had heard anything from either your professional organization, COSBO, or anything like that, because the Auditor General's recommendations are finding some traction, and it's alarming to business departments what action might be required if it's something like, okay, we want you to count for $10 million of fundraising in your schools, and that we don't have a complete mechanism, in order to do that. I can see a lot of new hires.
Through you, Madam Chair, actually, I'm glad you asked the question. Through our COSBO group, they're working on they want a working committee formed to work with the ministry on it. So there are some school boards that are participating in it. I would suspect it's probably those boards that are getting the qualified opinions that are eager to sit on these committees to work through it. But certainly COSBO is aware of the issue. And we have some representation for a working committee to explore the issue further.
Thanks very much for that.
Thanks so much for those questions. I just wanted to make a note for trustees that we are actually at timed items on the board meeting agenda, but we'll continue along with our agenda here as I think we can wrap up hopefully shortly. So if there are no further questions on item G2, I will continue along on our agenda. There were no delegations at the time of agenda preparation. There was nobody on the speakers list. There's no new business. And so we are at item K, which is reports. Item K1 and K2 are the tender and request for proposals awarded for the quarter ended. The first one is for May 31st, 2022, and the second is for August 31st, 2022. And I know that Superintendent Armstrong and her team are prepared to take any questions from trustees on these reports. These ones. Okay, seeing none, I just had one quick question. Oh, and I see Julia's hand as well. So Trustee Burgess, go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry, there we go. It's a comment and a question, I suppose, but it's a comment. Last Tuesday, I had an opportunity to meet with the Minister of Education at the construction site of Kingsville K-12 school. And I was delighted to hear that and see not only 2 co-op students on site from Kingsville District High School, that the, I'm not sure his position, maybe Ms. Hinchcliffe can help me with that, but the site foreman, whomever, was a graduate of KDHS, and that the tender that we see on page 20 of our package for the roofing of the new building went to a local firm, Kingsville Roofing, and the base bid and the accepted separate prices, if you see there, a large tender that ended up going into the local economy. And I just wanted to say it's really nice when that happens. I know it might be serendipitous because it was, low bid and all the rest, but it's just remarkable to see that a project has so much local implications.
Thanks so much, Trustee Burgess. Any other questions or comments on these reports? Again, I just had one, which was on page 19, which was on the security systems upgrades. I know that there's a number of them across many schools in our district, and I just was curious what they were. What were those upgrades?
So I can answer that, and if there's anyone else who wants to elaborate, please do through you, Madam Chair. That upgrade was to replace all the keypads and security systems controllers throughout all the schools that are mentioned in that list.
Okay, thank you. Any other further questions or comments from trustees? Okay, seeing none, there's item K3, which is the interim financial expense report. I know that Mr. Mayhew did a presentation, which was the year-end update, and he referenced this report. I don't know if there's anything further to say, or if you're just prepared to take questions from trustees.
If anyone has any questions, we'd be happy to take them. Yep.
Okay, great, thank you. So I look to my colleagues. Anything further on this report? Okay, seeing none, I will go to item K4, which is policy regulation BA02, borrowing and investing of funds reporting. Any questions on this one? Sure, go ahead, Trustee Burgess.
Actually, that's a mistake. Hands coming down.
Oh, okay. Okay, and this is just for reporting purposes, to my understanding. The only question that I had, and it occurred to me this afternoon, was I noted that it said that we haven't borrowed or invested any of our funds. Does that mean that with our surplus that we have, accumulated surplus, we don't invest that anywhere in any sort of investments? Is that an accurate read of the situation at a high level?
I can try and start that if you want, Sean.
Sure.
Sure,
Okay,
you start. Yeah.
Sure. Through you, Madam Chair, the surplus, and I apologize because I have a tickle in my throat. The surplus really is the excess of revenues and expenditures that flow into our financial statements. And some of those revenues and expenditures may be accrual entries, so they're not necessarily all cash-based. When we talk about borrowing and investing of funds, we're talking about the actual cash, that we have on hand in our bank. And what we're finding is that there is a cash management process that the ministry implements where we don't get 100% of our cash grant. They always, once I start, I can't stop. They always withhold a portion of our cash funding. And so basically the cash that we do have on hand is sufficient to meet our current needs, and in particular we have a lot of construction projects that are going on right now where we have large payments going out. It's difficult to invest even in something simple like a GIC, because oftentimes you've got to lock these things in for 30, 60, 90 days, and we need more readily accessible cash in order to settle some of those payments. So I don't know, Sean, if you want to add anything further to that.
Yeah,
Sorry
I
for the
can, through you,
coughing.
Madam Chair. I was going to try and take over for you, Shelley. I can just add to that briefly. Yes, Superintendent Armstrong mentioned it. When we look at investing, right now our interest rate, our deposit interest rate that we receive from the bank on our cash balance as it exists, is a pretty good rate. If we were to get a rate better, we'd have to lock into an investment, a more longer term investment, probably beyond the 3-month mark. With the amount of capital activity that we've had lately, we need that cash available and we need to have that ready for use. So it wouldn't be an advantage to us. We have looked at investment strategies, but as Superintendent Armstrong mentioned, with a greater surplus, that surplus actually goes into the calculation from the ministry to hold back funds from us. So the greater surplus, the more cash that gets held back as well. So we are monitoring cash on a weekly, a monthly basis. Our eyes on it all the time. It goes up, it goes down, depending on the level of activity of capital payments and our accounts payable runs and our payroll, our advances. So we are looking at that actively throughout the year.
And certainly, if I can just add, it's not, Sean and I have had this conversation before about should we be investing? And so, you have to do a cash flow analysis to get to that point to see whether it makes sense, and it just doesn't right now.
And sorry, just one thing to add to, if I may, we have had those conversations with our bank as well and investment advisors. This is not something that we're independently assessing. We look to experts as well to help advise us based on our cash flows. So we have had those conversations with RBC, and they've advised us as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that comprehensive answer. That's exactly kind of what I was looking for. So it's good to know that there is eyes on it and you're thinking about it. I appreciate your due diligence there. And so thank you for just letting us know as well. So thank you. Any other further questions then from my colleagues? Okay, seeing none, I go to trustee question period. Are there any questions from trustees for the Ops and Finance Committee meeting this evening? Okay, seeing none. Oh, okay, I see Trustee Cheen. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. We got the information that our enrollment has increased. I wonder what's the effect? What does it affect our, budget? Thank you.
So through you, Madam Chair, I can start this one and speak to that. And if Superintendent Armstrong wants to jump in afterwards, she's free to. So our enrollment increase that Trustee Chen you're referring to reflects our enrollment currently, which will impact the 22-23 budget year. As of right now, compared to our original budget, our enrollment estimates that we approved as part of the June budget process, we're seeing an increase of approximately 1,000 students in the elementary panel, and I think we're looking to be flat in the secondary panel. That said, any impacts of enrollment increases will be flowed through our revised budget process. When we submit that to the ministry in December 15th is usually that deadline. And we have to consider a lot of things with respect to that enrollment. Of course, that enrollment will generate additional funding through the grant formula. However, it may result in adjustments such as the reduction of a declining enrollment grant. So it might have offsetting impact elsewhere. With that additional funding that we receive, we have to consider things such as additional resources, additional staffing, teachers. We did not consider as part of our original budget the impact of the virtual costs or virtual school. At the time, we did not know the amount of students that were opting out of in-person learning. So that's something we have to consider as part of a revised budget, as well as other student needs. So we will be looking at that and finalizing that enrollment. We'll be looking at it after October 31st. 31st is our first snapshot of that enrollment, and that enrollment will be finalized at that time. So it could still change a tiny bit up until that point, and then we'll be preparing our revised budget to consider all cost changes.
Thank you so much. Any other further questions from trustees during trustee question period? Okay, seeing none, I notice there's a motion for the Ops and Finance Committee meeting this evening. Sure, I see Trustee Leclerc. I assume Trustee Chin, your hand is a previous hand, so I'll go to Trustee Leclerc.
Thank you, and Madame Leboeuf, I will provide you with a written copy because this is a long one. That administration conduct a review of the current busing landscape, including pickup times for students, drop-off times for students, impact on school bell times, walking distance requirements, other board walking distances from a provincial scan, courtesy ride policy, provincial scan, special education transportation policy on a provincial scan, current bus capacity versus actual ridership on all current routes, number of, if any, grievances related to working conditions for any GEDDSB employee group or consortium employee groups, review of walking distance changes over the last decade, local only, and that administration report back not more than 180 days from the date this motion is adopted. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Leclerc. Are there any other further notices of motion for the Ops and Finance Committee meeting? The only thing I wanted to note was that the next Ops and Finance Committee meeting I don't think will be until February, if I'm not mistaken. So this won't appear until that committee meeting, Trustee Leclerc. I just wanted to make sure that. Okay. Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Okay, any announcements for this committee from trustees this evening? Okay, seeing none, I do have a few. I'm just pulling up my notes here. So give me one moment. Okay, firstly, I want to announce that it is officially Walktober, which is October is the International Walk to School Month. Locally, as well as throughout the province, we are trying to encourage active transportation, healthy lifestyles, etc., for all of our students and families. So tomorrow specifically is International Walk to School Day. And so I encourage families to walk to school if that's possible. And if they can, to just pay attention. To just pay attention to all the infrastructure needs, to pay attention to the crosswalks, the stop signs, etc. And also maybe it allows you the time to slow down and pay attention to your loved ones and just be present with your family as you take that journey to school together. Over the past few years, we've had 5 schools participate as pilot schools in the new Active Transportation Initiative for the Greater Essex County District School Board. Thank you to Superintendent Allender for taking the lead on that. And this year, we are going to continue with those same 5 schools and also add another 5. Ultimately, our goal is to have this as a board-wide initiative in the future, and I'm really thankful and supportive of this work, and thank our administration for all that they've done and to get their school communities on board. It's a lot of work, and you know, I'm some of those families that try to make this work, but it is hard, and so I thank you for all the work that our principals and our school councils and the students that have done at those pilot schools and who continue to do that work on a day-to-day basis. You can also visit the OntarioActiveSchoolTravel.ca to get ideas and inspiration for your school communities. And make sure that you share these with your parent councils, with your principal, and also to your trustees. I think it's important that we know the needs of our system so that we can better advocate to our municipal partners across the entire board district. So that was my first announcement there. Seeing as there's still none from the other trustees, I will continue on. The third week of October is Waste Reduction Week. So that would be the week of October 17th that we'll be observing this. It is the country's most successful waste reduction public awareness campaign that has engaged and encouraged Canadians to reduce their waste each year since 2001. So what can you do? They encourage everyone to proclaim, pledge, and promote all the ways that we as individuals can reduce waste that week, but then also in our lives more broadly. Okay, and the last announcement that I have, so this weekend is Thanksgiving, and I wish all the staff and students at the Greater Essex County District School Board a safe and happy long weekend. I would be remiss if I did not also acknowledge and encourage our families to take a moment of reflection to not just think about the gratitude that we have for our friends and families, but also for the gratitude for the land that we are on, to learn about those lands and also about the history of Indigenous peoples across Canada. While many of us will spend the time feasting, stemming from the tradition of celebrating a bountiful harvest, I think there are ways that we can decolonize and reclaim these traditions in ways that acknowledge and celebrate Indigenous legacy of land stewardship, something that I know that I myself have a lot to learn about. And so I just wanted to encourage that moment of reflection for all of our staff, students, and families across the Greater Essex County District School Board. So with that, I will, oh, and I had one final announcement, echoing my my colleague, Trustee Olmsted's comments. This is my final meeting as the chair of the Operations and Finance Committee. And I do want to thank first and foremost Superintendent Armstrong and also Mr. Sean Mayhew and also Mrs. Tammy Malash. All of you have done the most of the heavy lifting of putting these agendas together and also communicating well in advance with trustees and myself. And so thank you so much for your work in communicating the difficult information of operations and finance to the trustees. So I appreciate your willingness there to receive feedback and try to present that information as clearly as possible. And I thank my colleagues who have elected me into this position. Yeah, just thank you very much for that honor. So I will adjourn this meeting at 10:15 p.m. and we will convene into our public board meeting. So I will pass it off to Chairperson Higgison.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Trustee Sipkar and Trustee Cheen, for your work as chair and vice chair of Ops and Finance. It's been quite a ride doing these sorts of pandemic budgets and ventilation reports and things like that. So I thank you very much for your leadership and your communication with us as your colleagues. So thank you very much for that. All right, so we are back on our public meeting agenda this evening. We are at E, any declarations of conflict of interest for public session? Seeing and hearing none. Actions of the board meeting private session. Trustee Cook.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So under new business, we have G2, and I'm just looking for a mover for G2. Trustee Sartori and a seconder? Trustee Sipkar. Anyone opposed? Don't hear or see any, so that one passes. Thank you.
Much appreciated. Thank you very much. So we are down to G, approval of the minutes of our June 7th board meeting. Moved by Trustee Leclerc, seconded by Trustee Sipkar. Appreciate it. Any discussion on that? Approval of the minutes? Anyone in opposition to approve those minutes? Seeing none, that passes. Any business arising from those minutes, trustees? Seeing none. Any recommendations from our standing committees this evening? Not this evening. Thank you very much. Any notices of motion? Trustee Sipkar.
Thank you. So the notice of motion I'd like to bring forward to the October 18th board meeting is that the GEDDSB observes September 30th as the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation through a system-wide closure of schools for the upcoming 2023-2024 calendar school year. And I will present that to Ms. LeBeau. Thank you.
Much appreciated. Trustee Sartori.
Thank you. This is a notice of motion for the to be debated at the October 18th board meeting, that administration provide a report to trustees on the fundraising dollars each year for the last 10 years in all schools across the Greater Essex County District School Board, cross-referenced by median income. And I will provide that to Ms. LeBeau as well. Thank you.
Much appreciated. Any other notices of motion for this evening? Well, perfect. It is 10:18, and I will adjourn our meeting for this evening. Thank you to our colleagues and senior administrators for hanging out with us till 10:15 tonight, 10:18, and everybody have a good night.
Thank you, Madam Chairs.